Chapter 685. The old man's tone was very arrogant, but there was also a trace of helplessness. He was the Lee family's ancestor. Or rather, it was a part of the Lee family's ancestors' will before he died. This will was also divided into several parts, and they were all given to the Lee family's unity of Heaven Realm experts, so that their lives would not be in danger. The most complete part was naturally on Li Jueqing's body. He would only appear when Li Jueqing was under the threat of death. Nine Leaf looked at the Li family's ancestors' will, and purple light flowed in his eyes. He licked his lips slightly and said, "Tsk, what a great tonic." The Li family's ancestor frowned. In an instant, the wind and clouds changed, and a dark cloud appeared, just like his current mood. Lung Shiqi, who was hiding in the dark, was secretly shocked. The Li family's ancestor was clearly only left with a strand of will, but his emotions could still affect the weather. Hua Luiyue also appeared at this time. He was wearing the nether blood robe assassin's robe. Without a word, he extended 2 fingers. A bright red, demonic petal floated out from between his fingers. The petal floated down. It looked very slow, but in the blink of an eye, it was as if it had crossed space and landed on the Li family's ancestor's head. The Li family's ancestors' eyes narrowed, and a hint of seriousness appeared. "You have already reached the point of condensing the spiritual power of heaven and earth. It seems that you are not far from that step. Unfortunately, you are still a little lacking." Cloud flipping. The Li family's ancestors' body shone with spiritual energy. Several giant palms gathered in all directions, and the spiritual power of heaven and earth surged like a black hole. In the 8 giant palms, there seemed to be a faint magical power that was enough to make heaven and earth lose color. That was the origin energy of heaven and earth. Only Tianyuan realm experts could control the origin energy of heaven and earth. Under the giant palms, the fragile petal did not dissipate immediately. Instead, it passed through 5 giant palms in succession before gradually fading away. Hua Luiyue said lightly, "You are very strong, but you are only a strand of will. Little did you know that your nemesis is here." Hearing this, the Li family's ancestor sneered. Just as he was about to speak, the giant scorpion shadow opened its mouth and spat out a large ball of green demonic power. The Li family's ancestor's expression suddenly changed. That wave of demonic energy actually contained a power that made his heart palpitate. As soon as the green demonic energy appeared, the Li family ancestor's shadow began to tremble slightly. The edges of his body already showed signs of collapsing. Why is that? The Li family patriarch's eyes widened as he stared at Nine Leaf. Suddenly he seemed to remember something and said in horror, "You're the soul-leaving scorpion." "Now that you know, it is too late." Nine Leaf smiled enchantingly. The green light expanded and turned into 2 tentacles that wrapped around the Li family elder's shadow. Immediately after, wisps of soul energy visible to the naked eye were extracted from the Li family patriarch's body by Nine Leaf. The Li family patriarch's figure immediately shrank. He was horrified, but he couldn't give up just like that. He formed a strange seal and immediately transformed into a ferocious demonic creature. Demonic chi surged, and even the ground shook. And a portion of Nine Leaf's demonic power was forced back. The Li clan ancestor finally saw a glimmer of hope. "If you were still at the 7th step, then I really wouldn't have any chance at all. However, you're only at the 6th step now, so you can't do anything to me." Demonic transformation. But at this moment, dots of starlight suddenly appeared. In the blink of an eye, the starlight flowed and a complicated star chart shone in the night sky. In the blink of an eye, this space turned into a starry universe. The Li family patriarch's demonic body suddenly shrank by more than half. He couldn't help but be shocked, because he could no longer sense and mobilize the spiritual power of heaven and earth. Or it could be said that this space had been completely isolated. Lung Shiqi walked out. He was bathed in the bright starlight. This was the heavenly cycle star god shield that he used. And Nine Leaf's demonic power wasn't affected much because what Nine Leaf used could be considered the innate ability of the soul-leaving scorpion, not borrowing the spiritual power of heaven and earth. Under this situation, the Li family patriarch's soul energy was constantly being extracted, and his demonic body was about to collapse. At this moment, Lung Shiqi formed a Buddhist seal. and a Vairocana Dharma idol bloomed behind him. The solemn Buddhist light illuminated the ages. Lung Shiqi clenched his fists and black and white light intertwined. The power of yin and yang surged and condensed into a yin-yang dragon that coiled on the shoulder of the Buddha statue. Then he tapped his dantian with one finger. With a whoosh, a faint layer of golden red dragon flames burned. Dragon flames burning the world. Buddhist light everywhere. Lung Shiqi didn't move. Just this power caused the Li family patriarch's demonic body to completely collapse. Nine Leave was delighted and worked even harder to absorb the Li family patriarch's soul energy. Now the Li family patriarch's phantom had dimmed a lot. He turned his head in shock. This is the golden red dragon flames? No, and that divine power, what is it? Why have I never seen it before? You talk too much. The Li family seems to have inherited this trait of yours. Lung Shiqi was expressionless. He stretched out a palm, and the Vairocana Dharma idol also slapped out a palm. In an instant, endless Buddhist light gathered and condensed into a golden Buddha palm that covered the sky. Vairocana, Vajra annihilation, Buddha's divine palm. At the same time, Buddhist lotuses appeared in the air and blocked all escape routes. The Li family patriarch's eyes were filled with shock and disbelief. At first he thought that this person was just a little mouse, but he actually had such strength. In his opinion, Lung Shiqi's Buddha's divine palm was close to the middle and late stages of oneness of heaven and man. Especially when the spiritual power of heaven and earth was isolated. Anyone below the middle stage of oneness of heaven and man would be vulnerable. The Li family patriarch began to struggle wildly. However, he was just a thought. He could still mobilize the spiritual power of heaven and earth, and even a trace of elemental energy of heaven and earth. But now there was a tiger in front and a wolf behind. He was really in a desperate situation. The Buddha's divine palm fell, and the Li family patriarch's phantom was swallowed by the Buddhist light, and completely disappeared from the world. Even Li Jiuqing, who was still hiding in the blood cocoon, died without a complete corpse. Jiuli also quickly withdrew her demonic power and retreated far away. The Buddhist light was also very effective against demonic beasts like her. Fortunately, Lung Shiqi did not target her, so she could control the Li family patriarch and continue to weaken his strength. When all the Buddhist light dissipated, a huge palm print with a radius of 20 to 30 miles appeared on the ground. Looking carefully, it was hundreds of feet deep. There was also a terrifying power in it that made people afraid to approach. Jiu Li and Hua Luiyue were also a little dazed when they saw this scene. Was this really the destructive power of someone in the middle stage of Gang spirit realm? In fact, this was achieved by Lung Shiqi using the Heavenly Star Gang, Vajra Unbreakable Divine Art, Floating Dragon Taishu, Red Gold Earth Dragon Flame and Buddha's Divine Palm at the same time. At this moment, Lung Shiqi's face was incomparably pale. His various powers had been greatly exhausted, especially the Crimson Gold Earth Dragon Flame, which was already in a weakened state. Now that he had forcefully used it, it was likely that he wouldn't be able to use it for a period of time. He quickly retracted the Heavenly Cycle Star God Gang. Looking at the huge palm print, he frowned. Chapter 686. Lung Shiqi did not expect Li Jiuqing's trump card to be so strong. In fact, Hua Luiyue's sneak attack almost killed Li Jiuqing at the beginning. With 9 Leave here, as long as Li Jiuqing was not abnormally strong, Lung Shiqi only needed to be a bystander. But the result was still a little beyond his expectations. Although he had killed Li Jiuqing, it was very troublesome to deal with the scene. If he left it alone with the Dark Thunder Guard's ability, they would definitely find out a lot of information, which might lead to him being exposed. Moreover, when he killed Li Juning, he also used the Buddha's palm. Li Zhizh and Li family's fourth uncle were not dead yet. If they came to the scene, they would be able to tell at a glance that it was done by the same person. A thought flashed through Lung Shiqi's mind. Next, he half knelt and pressed his hands against the ground. His mind had already become one with the ground, and he instantly connected with the mysterious power of the earth. He closed his eyes and with a thought, the nearby ground slowly returned to normal. About a quarter of an hour later, the dazzling huge palm shadow no longer existed. However, it had not completely returned to its original state. The ground could be considered flat now, but it was completely bare. There was not the slightest bit of grass or trees. Leng Shiqi's face was even paler, as if he was terminally ill. The ground under him was covered in sweat, but he looked very excited. Not only did he have a preliminary grasp of the power of the earth, but he also erased the most important traces of the battle. What made him even happier was that he found Li Jueqing's mustard bracelet underground. He was afraid that there was a restriction inside, so he did not open it directly. Instead, he threw it into the system space. Leng Shiqi stood up and found that Hua Luiyue and Nine Leaf were staring at him with a strange gaze. However, the two of them did not ask much. At this time, Nine Leaf's expression suddenly changed. She said anxiously, "Someone is approaching." Their assassination of Li Jueqing was very noisy. Fortunately, this place was remote and there were not many people nearby. Hua Luiyue said bluntly, "It's done. I will return to the Blood Garment Pavilion first." After that, he turned into a phantom and left. "Let's go. By the way, why does this Hua Luiyue look familiar to me?" Nine Leaf asked curiously. Leng Shiqi secretly smiled. Nine Leaf and Hua Luiyue were colleagues. They had worked together for a period of time, but Nine Leaf did not notice anything special about Hua Luiyue. It was clear that Hua Luiyue's concealment methods were indeed amazing. In fact, after Hua Luiyue saw Nine Leaf, he was also surprised for a while because he did not realize that Nine Leaf was actually a transformed great demon. Leng Shiqi told the two of them that the other party was a helper he had invited, and they didn't pursue the matter. Then, in order to make it easier for him to go back without being noticed, Nine Leaf's soul entered the Leng Shiqi's galaxy space as usual, while his physical body was placed in the system space. Leng Shiqi immediately activated Fate and teleported back to Xingji Pavilion's secret cultivation room. As soon as he returned, he prepared to meditate to recover his strength. However, Nine Leaf could not help but ask curiously, "Leng Shiqi, what have you been through these days? Why did your strength increase so quickly? Just now, when you killed that mysterious shadow, even I had to retreat. How many secrets do you have that I don't know?" Leng Shiqi certainly could not answer this question truthfully. However, just as he opened his mouth, he was interrupted by Nine Leaf. "All right, you don't have to explain. Anyway, there is no truth in your words." Hearing this, Leng Shiqi was relieved because he really did not have a good reason or excuse. At the same time, he said a little resentfully, "Thank you for your understanding, Senior Nine Leaf. Since you are so capable that you can even kill Li Jueqing, then the position of the four great managers is probably not far from yours." Nine Leaf's voice was a little teasing, and this sentence happened to speak to Leng Shiqi's heart. The reason why he went through so much trouble to kill Li Jueqing, other than for revenge, was also for the position of the four great managers. If he had to wait for one of the four great managers to abdicate or die in an accident before he had a chance, how long would he have to wait? Even the oldest manager Hai was said to have just started to deteriorate. As long as he controlled himself and did not take action, it would not be a problem for him to live for another 20 or 30 years. It had only been a few years since Leng Shiqi left Blood Mist Island. He did not have the patience to wait for another 20 or 30 years. Previously, he had strived hard to obtain the position of deputy manager in order to have the qualifications to compete for the position of four great managers. Only the 36 deputy managers had this qualification. The others could not even think about it. And among these 36 people, a portion of the competitors could be eliminated first. Now that Li Jueqing was dead, the Li family still had Li Jugu and Li family's fourth uncle, two oneness of Heaven Realm experts. There were also several deputy managers under them. It seemed that their power was still quite strong. However, without the deterrence of the position of four great managers, how many people would be willing to continue to be loyal to the Li family? Moreover, one should not forget that the Li family had offended many people. Now that Li Jueqing was dead, the first to make trouble would probably be Eunuch Gao. As for the others, most of them would hit them when they were down. In particular, the great commander, Heavenly Venerable Black Flame, had long disliked the Li family. As long as he acquiesced, the Li family would not survive for long. At that time, everyone in the Li family would naturally lose the qualifications to compete for the position of four great managers. In total, Leng Shiqi's competitors were only about 20 people. Of course, none of those 20 people were simple people. They had been deputy managers for many years. Whether it was strength, experience, ability, influence, or all kinds of connections, they were all very strong. It was impossible for Leng Shiqi to compete with them directly. It could be said that he was beaten in all aspects. Leng Shiqi intended to find another way. The only thing he lacked was an opportunity. Now that Li Jueqing was dead, the opportunity had come. His eyes moved, and he said to Nine Leaf, "Senior, if I become one of the 4 great managers of the Dark Thunder Guards, I don't dare to say anything else, but I can definitely help you recover your cultivation in the shortest time possible." "Oh, you're already painting a big picture for me?" Nine Leaf said. Leng Shiqi knew that Nine Leaf would not agree to help him if he did not take out some practical benefits. He directly took out a mustard seed bag and said, "Senior, these are the treasures I obtained in Void Scar Sky 2 days ago. I'll give them all to you as a token of my sincerity." Nine Leaf's spiritual power swept across the mustard seed bag, and he immediately laughed. "You're really rich now. Don't worry, as long as the resources are in place, just call me when it's time to help." Immediately, Leng Shiqi felt relieved. With Nine Leaf around, it could be considered a form of protection for him. Then he began to meditate and recuperate. When dawn broke the next day, he could hear the noise outside even from the secret room. Feichin anxiously shouted outside, "Master, something big has happened. Manager Li is dead." Chapter 687. Leng Shiqi opened the door to the secret room and asked in surprise, "What did you say? Say it again." "Li Jueqing, head steward Li is dead," Feichin repeated. He even added, "It was the guards of the Li family's ancestral hall who discovered that Li Jueqing's nameplate was broken that they hurriedly spread the news. Moreover, we also received information that there was a fierce battle outside the imperial capital last night. From the preliminary investigation, there were indeed traces of head steward Li's actions." "So it's like this," Leng Shiqi said in a deep voice. "What's the situation now?" Feichin replied, "The other 3 head stewards are gathering people and preparing to go together to carefully investigate who killed head steward Li. Killing the 4 head stewards of the Dark Thunder Guard near the imperial capital. If we don't cut the murderer into pieces, our Dark Thunder Guard will lose face." Leng Shiqi coughed and said, "Cough cough, I understand. You can leave first." "Yes." At this time Nine Leaf's voice sounded. "Did you hear that? Your subordinates want to cut you into pieces." Leng Shiqi ignored Nine Leaf's mockery and said seriously, "Senior Nine Leaf, I will return to the place of the battle. The other 3 head stewards will also go. Senior must be careful." Nine Leaf said indifferently, "Don't worry. Now that my cultivation has mostly recovered, and I am hiding in your knowledge sea, even a Sky Origin Realm expert won't be able to detect my presence." Hearing this, Leng Shiqi was relieved. Not long after, Leng Shiqi returned to the place where he killed Li Jueqing. However, this time there were a lot of people who came. It could be said that all of the Dark Thunder Guard's eunuchs and above were present. The 3 head stewards were all present. Even the head steward He Yen, who hadn't appeared for a long time, was present. Leng Shiqi stood behind eunuch Gao and sized up Heavenly Lord He Yen. This mysterious head steward had an ordinary appearance and a square face that looked dignified without being angry. He sized up Heavenly Venerable Black Flame for no other reason than the fact that this great commander still owed him a reward. When Leng Shiqi was preparing to leave for the Western Wilderness County, Heavenly Lord He Yen had given him a secret mission, which was to sow discord between the 6 nations of the Western region and the Starfall dynasty. The reward was information about a certain worldly variant. Leng Shiqi had returned to the imperial capital for some time now, but Empyrean Black Flame hadn't come to find him. He didn't even know where to find Empyrean Black Flame, so the matter had been dragged on like this. Although Leng Shiqi bumped into Heavenly Lord Black Flame today, it was obviously not the right time to mention the reward. He wanted to see what these Dark Thunder Guards could find. Although Leng Shiqi had deliberately erased the traces of the battle, the Dark Thunder Guards here were all experts in investigation. He was really afraid of being found out. Everyone looked around and their expressions turned ugly. the aged general manager Hai said strangely. Strange, from the remnant aura. There was clearly a battle between unity of heaven and man realm here not long ago. But why are there no signs of battle left behind? Even if the culprit deliberately erased it, it's impossible to erase it so cleanly. Shintazhen grabbed a handful of soil from the ground and said, "This soil is very strange. There's an indescribable aura in it. The culprit might be an expert who cultivates an earth attribute cultivation technique." Eunuch Gao shook his head slightly. "I think there's definitely more than one culprit. Almost no one in unity of heaven and man realm can kill Li Jueqing alone. Also, I think I caught a very weak demonic aura." "I felt it too," General Manager Hai continued. "Could it be someone from the Imperial Beast Abode or the Blood Beast sect?" Eunuch Gao refuted. "It shouldn't be. These two sects are in the Northern Wei Empire. It's impossible for them to come all the way here to kill General Manager Li. Moreover, if a unity of heaven and man realm expert from the Northern Wei Empire came to the Thunderblaze Empire, the Dark Thunder Guards would have found out long ago. You don't need to investigate." At this time, Empyrean Black Flame spoke. The three general managers immediately walked over respectfully. Since the general had spoken, he must have seen something. Empyrean Black Flame looked at the ground under his feet and said, "The culprit is a heavenly origin realm expert." "What?" Eunuch Gao and the other two were shocked. It wasn't impossible for the culprit to be a heavenly origin realm expert. What puzzled them was, why would a heavenly origin realm expert want to kill Li Jueqing? If one were to say who was Li Jueqing's sworn enemy, it would definitely be Eunuch Gao. However, he couldn't invite a heavenly origin realm expert to take action. Moreover, although they didn't find too many clues, they could determine that a fierce battle had occurred here. If a heavenly origin realm expert took action, he could kill Li Jueqing with a flip of his hand. Why would he go through so much trouble? Empyrean Black Flame explained. "The ground under our feet has been tampered with by someone. It contains a strange power of the earth. That is a power that surpasses the origin energy of heaven and earth. Even this Empyrean has only just touched this level. There are many kinds of auras left here. However, Li Jueqing has learned a lot in his life, so it's not strange. As for why Li Jueqing wasn't killed instantly, don't forget that Li Jueqing's ancestor is very strong." With these words, Eunuch Gao and the other two became even more restless. It seemed that the person who took action was a peak existence even in the heavenly origin realm. Moreover, they also felt that Empyrean Black Flame's words were reasonable. Back then, the Li family's ancestor was indeed an extremely talented person. Unfortunately, in order to seek a higher realm, he had tortured himself until he was crippled. In the end, he could only die depressed. Before the Li family's ancestor died, he must have left behind some life-saving trump cards for his descendants. "Grand Commander, what should we do next?" Manager Hai asked. Empyrean Black Flame muttered to himself. "I will personally report this matter to His Majesty. Quickly settle down the Li family and stabilize the Dark Thunder Guards. After all, the battle to wipe out so many sects requires the strength of the Dark Thunder Guards. We cannot be a burden to His Majesty." This subordinate obeys, Manager Hai and the other two said in unison. Immediately after, Empyrean Black Flame transformed into a stream of black fire and suddenly disappeared. Eunuch Gao, Manager Hai, and Shintazhen looked at each other, then smiled faintly. Actually, they knew better than anyone else that Li Jueqing's death was definitely not that simple. However, since the Grand Commander had already made a decision, they naturally did not want to investigate further. What they cared more about was that there were still enormous benefits waiting for them. That was to divide up the Li family's power and resources. With Li Jueqing's death, the Li family only had fourth uncle and Li Jugu, two Unity of Heaven realm experts left. In the eyes of Eunuch Gao and the others, there was nothing to fear. Now whoever acted faster would be able to divide up more benefits. As for how Li Jueqing died, it was not important to them. As for the Dark Thunder Guard's face, could face be used as food? Everyone immediately returned home. As for Lung Shiqi, the stone in his heart finally fell to the ground. He could say with certainty that if the person who died last night was one of the other three managers, the matter would definitely not have ended so carelessly. Even Empyrean Black Flame would have investigated with all his might. Perhaps he could have found some clues. But who told Li Jucheng and the Li family to be so powerful? From Empyrean Black Flame and Eunuch Gao to the ordinary War Thunder Guards and Hidden Thunder Guards, they all disliked the Li family. Thus, Li Jucheng's death was something that everyone was happy to see. Since that was the case, why not go with the flow and use this opportunity to pull out the Li family? From then on, Empyrean Black Flame could completely control the entire Dark Thunder Guards. Eunuch Gao and the others could also divide up a huge amount of power and resources. This was a win-win situation, so why not? Chapter 688. Starting early in the morning, the Dark Thunder Guard carried out a great purge. Under Heavenly Venerable He Yan's tacit approval and the joint efforts of the 3 general managers, the entire Li family's forces were uprooted in a short day. The Li family's 2 Unity of Heaven realm experts, Li Jugu and Li family's 4th uncle, had suffered from the backlash of the spiritual attachment technique. Their old injuries had yet to heal, and after learning that Li Jucheng had died, they were even more anxious. They could not personally go to the scene, and could only wait for the result at home. However, the result they waited for was a disaster. Eunuch Gao, General Manager Hai, and Shen Tizhen personally took action, and beheaded Li Jugu and Li family's 4th uncle in a few moves. They did not even have time to say that Li Jucheng had gone to hunt down Leng Shiqi before they died with hatred. They also framed Li Jucheng and the Li family with one heinous crime after another, declaring that Li Jucheng reaped what he sowed, and that they were cleaning up the family. In this way, the Dark Thunder Guard's face was saved, and they also gained the reputation of being righteous and upright. That day, the Dark Thunder Guard headquarters was filled with the smell of blood. Corpses were carried out one after another, piling up into a mountain of corpses. It was not until evening that Heavenly Venerable He Yan summoned all the people above the inspector rank to gather in the conference hall. Leng Shiqi was naturally present. After taking his seat, he found that there were only about 3/4 of the people left, and there were only about 20 deputy general managers. Even if some people were out on missions, it was impossible for there to be only so few people. It seemed that within this day, many of the Dark Thunder Guard's upper echelons had died. Of course, in the near future, this place would be full of people again. However, at that time, the Dark Thunder Guard headquarters forces would have been reshuffled. Everyone present sat upright and still, not daring to neglect in the slightest, and not daring to make the slightest sound. This time, not only did the general come to the conference, but everyone also personally experienced today's purge. They were all extremely shocked. The Li family, which had been rooted in the Dark Thunder Guards for so long, was destroyed so easily. The Dark Thunder Guards changed so quickly, which made it difficult for most people to adapt in a short time. After everyone arrived, Empyrean Black Flame finally appeared. He said, "This Empyrean has already reported Li Juecheng's death to His Majesty. Li Juecheng deserved his punishment, but we cannot allow the murderer to go unpunished. We must continue to investigate." His Majesty meant that in order not to delay the plan to annihilate many powerful sects, the Dark Thunder Guards could not be lost. Therefore, we will elect a successor to the position of the 4th Grand Chief within 2 days. As soon as he said that, a commotion broke out in the meeting hall. The eyes of the deputy general managers lit up. According to the rules of the Dark Thunder Guards, every deputy general manager had the qualifications to become one of the 4 general managers. Perhaps one of them could become the 4th general manager. That would truly be standing at the peak of the mountain of authority. With just this identity, one could do whatever they wanted in the Thunderflame dynasty. Empyrean Black Flame raised his hand, and the crowd immediately quieted down. In the past, strength, ability, and meritorious service were indispensable in the selection of the 4 general managers. But this time it's urgent, and I don't want another Li Juecheng to appear in the Dark Thunder Guards. Therefore, the selection of the 4 general managers should be based on loyalty and ability. The deputy general managers present all frowned secretly. Most of these deputy general managers were experienced, and had high strength and meritorious service. But Empyrean Black Flame's words made them lose their biggest advantage, which was more advantageous to the new deputy general manager. At this time, several people looked at Leng Shiqi sitting on the side. Among all the deputy general managers, the one who was least likely to be one of the 4 general managers was definitely Leng Shiqi. His cultivation was only at the middle stage of Gang Spirit Realm. Of course, at his age, the middle stage of Gang Spirit Realm was already very outstanding. Moreover, his cultivation speed was also very fast. It could be said that his potential was infinite. Unfortunately, his time in the headquarters of the Dark Thunder Guards was very short, and his meritorious service was far less than that of others. If he had a few more years, he might have become a strong competitor. But the rules of the selection of the 4 general managers were different from those of the past. Even Leng Shiqi seemed to have a chance. Eunuch Gao and the other 2 also showed a thoughtful look. Now the deputy general managers who could still sit here were the 3 general managers' subordinates. If anyone could elect a general manager, it was equivalent to having the power of 2 general managers. None of them would let go of such an opportunity. So now the most important thing was, what was the process and test of the 4 general managers? Everyone's eyes were focused on Empyrean Black Flame. He continued, according to the previous rules, all the deputy general managers are qualified to compete. There are 3 steps in the process. First, the meritorious service is verified. Second, the supervisor and the 3 general managers are elected. Finally, the most important step is to be decided by His Majesty. When he said this, everyone's heart was a little turbulent again. In the past, the process of selecting the 4 general managers was similar, but there was no competition. The biggest difference was that His Majesty was directly involved in this matter. In fact, in the past, the appointment of the 4 general managers was also decided by His Majesty. Most of the time, it was the same person who was elected by everyone. But according to Empyrean Black Flame's words, the appointment this time seemed to be decided by His Majesty. All right, His Majesty has decreed that the new general manager must be elected by tomorrow night. Prepare tonight, and the election will begin tomorrow morning. After saying this, Empyrean Black Flame waved everyone away. A moment later, Leng Shiqi followed Eunuch Gao to the Cold Nether Pavilion. There were 7 deputy general managers who came with him. They were all Eunuch Gao's subordinates who wanted to run for the position of the 4 general managers. Only one of them was not in the imperial capital. He was afraid that he would miss this opportunity. Eunuch Gao said solemnly, "Who among you wants to be the new general manager? Step forward." As soon as he finished speaking, 6 people stepped forward. As for the remaining 2 people, 2 of them were old men with white beards. They knew that they were too old and did not have the energy, so they gave up. Leng Shiqi was one of the 6 people who stepped forward. His actions were naturally seen by others. The other 5 people were more or less disdainful. In terms of potential and Eunuch Gao's favor, they admitted that they were not as good as Leng Shiqi. But in terms of other things, he was not good enough. Leng Shiqi's stepping forward was completely within Eunuch Gao's expectations. After all, everyone knew about Leng Shiqi's ambition. Eunuch Gao said, "There are 6 of you now. Instead of electing all 6 of you at the same time, it's better to choose the most likely candidate. I will fully support him, and there will be more hope." The 6 people looked at each other. They all knew what Eunuch Gao meant. He wanted them to go through an internal selection first. Chapter 689. Eunuch Gao looked at Leng Shiqi and the others and said, "Time is of the essence. You only have one chance to persuade me." The first to speak was the middle-aged man standing in the middle. Although Leng Shiqi wasn't familiar with this person, he still knew him. This person's name was Ning Xinghua. He had a powerful cultivation base at the late stage of unity of heaven and man. He could be considered Eunuch Gao's true right-hand man. Ning Xinghua had been following Eunuch Gao for more than 10 years, and had made countless contributions to the empire. Among the 6 of them, Ning Xinghua was the most qualified to compete for the position of one of the 4 chiefs. He cupped his fists and said, "My lord, I will fight for you in the Dark Thunder Guard." Ning Xinghua didn't say much. He didn't need to say much. Just one sentence was enough. This was his confidence. However, the others couldn't give up just like that. Immediately, the next person took over. Originally, Lung Shiqi was also thinking about how to persuade eunuch Gao. However, a thick drop of ink suddenly appeared in front of his eyes. Immediately, the ink drop seemed to drip into the water and rippled. The scene around him instantly turned into a sea of black fire. Heavenly Sage He Yin turned into a flame god and stared at Lung Shiqi. Lung Shiqi didn't panic at all. He immediately saluted and said, "Greetings, Commander. I'm here for your reward." Heavenly Sage He Yin directly stated his purpose. In fact, Lung Shiqi had guessed the moment Heavenly Sage He Yin appeared. He raised his head and asked, "Commander, I wonder if I can change my reward?" Heavenly Sage He Yin was a little surprised. "You don't even want a heaven and earth variant? You should know better than anyone the power of a heaven and earth variant." Lung Shiqi nodded and said, "Yes, a heaven and earth variant is indeed powerful. However, I want something else. I only need a word from you." Hearing this, Heavenly Sage He Yin seemed to have guessed Lung Shiqi's plan. He chuckled and said, "Lu Xingji, even if you have made great contributions, I can't support you in competing for the position of one of the 4 chiefs. Moreover, in this noble one's opinion, your chances are indeed very slim. I'm afraid that it would be very difficult for you to even get past Manager Gao. That's why I want a chance." Empyrean Black Flame stared at Lung Shiqi a few more times. "Your ambition is not small. Fine, this Empyrean wants to see what other tricks you are hiding." After saying this, Empyrean Black Flame snapped his fingers, and Lung Shiqi's consciousness instantly returned. He turned his head and saw that the second person had just finished speaking. When the third person was about to speak, eunuch Gao's expression suddenly changed. He reached out and interrupted the person, then suddenly looked at Lung Shiqi. Eunuch Gao's series of reactions aroused everyone's suspicion. They subconsciously looked at Lung Shiqi. Eunuch Gao said in a hoarse voice, "You don't have to say any more. I already know what to do." The others were all taken aback, especially the third person. He had lost his chance before he could even speak, so he felt extremely stifled in his heart. Ning Xinghua secretly smiled, feeling that he was in the bag. He did not expect Eunuch Gao to say, "I will do my best to recommend Lu Xingji." What? The others in the room suddenly stared at each other. Ning Xinghua could not help but exclaim. Even the 2 old men who had already given up stood up in surprise. At this time, everyone stared at Lung Shiqi. They did not understand. Eunuch Gao had just asked them to persuade him, but in the blink of an eye, he changed his mind and directly appointed Lung Shiqi. Why was this? This Lu Xingji had no qualifications, no cultivation, and no meritorious service. What qualifications did he have? Ning Xinghua did not care about anything else. He directly asked, "My lord, it's not that I doubt you, but you should at least give us an explanation. Why is this so?" Eunuch Gao stood up and said as he walked out, "This is the Grand Commander's intention." After saying this, Eunuch Gao left the place. It seemed that he was trying to build a relationship with Lung Shiqi, but the rest of the people were a bit frozen. Ning Xinghua clenched his fists tightly, and then loosened them. This was the closest he had ever been to being one of the 4 chiefs. If he missed this opportunity, he was afraid that he would never have another chance. He looked fiercely at Lung Shiqi and said, "I really admire Lord Lu's ability to flatter others. Not only did you manage to get close to Eunuch Gao, you even got close to the Grand Commander. But do you think you can become one of the 4 chiefs like this? You're too naive." Although the others were not as explicit as Ning Xinghua, they did not give Lung Shiqi a good look. If he relied on his own ability to get to the top, then they would naturally be convinced. But Lung Shiqi could not compare to anyone else. How could they be convinced? As for Lung Shiqi, he did not care. He did not care about what Ning Xinghua and the others thought. He also did not care about what anyone thought. As long as he could sit in the position of one of the 4 chiefs, he would make everyone obediently shut their mouths. After that, he returned to Xingji Pavilion by himself. He Feichen had already received the news that Eunuch Gao was going to recommend him. With a face full of excitement, he said, "Congratulations, sir. You are now only 1 step away from becoming one of the 4 chief stewards." Lung Shiqi shook his head. "What's there to congratulate? 1 step away, 1,000 li away. The other 2 chiefs will definitely recommend someone much stronger than me." He Feichen's face also became serious. He quietly said, "My lord, this subordinate has already asked around about the other two people." "Is that so? Let's hear it." Leng Shiqi did not expect He Feichen to be so well informed. Chief Shen Tu recommended Quan Jingji. This person's cultivation is profound, and he is also rather extreme. He is upright and plain-spoken, and abhors evil. Even if the Dark Thunder Guards did something wrong, he would not show any favoritism and severely punish them. Therefore, he has offended many people. However, once someone is in danger, he will go save them even if it costs him his life. He does not care about his own life and interests. At the same time, he is also respected by many people. Therefore, anyone who supports him will definitely support him. His voice is very loud. When Leng Shiqi heard this, he was rather interested in this Quan Jingji. This person really lived up to his name. He Feichen continued. As for the other person recommended by Chief Hai, Su Weiran, he is even more impressive. This person competed with Chief Shen Tu for the position of one of the 4 chiefs more than 10 years ago. Unfortunately, he was one step behind. Later on, he joined Chief Hai's faction. This time, he is preparing to make a comeback. His prestige is extremely high. He is also the person that everyone thinks is most likely to become one of the 4 chiefs. Leng Shiqi nodded. Since the news of the other 2 people had been obtained by He Feichen, then the news of eunuch Gao recommending him would naturally be obtained by others. Right now, he could already imagine the doubts and ridicule of others. He was definitely the one with the least hope. Chapter 690. Just as Leng Shiqi had expected, when the people outside heard that eunuch Gao had recommended Leng Shiqi, they all thought that eunuch Gao had taken things too hard and given up. As eunuch Gao had Ning Xinghua as his subordinate, many people felt that Leng Shiqi had given eunuch Gao a lot of benefits. To the other 2 candidates, Quan Jingji and Su Weiran, this was great news. Originally, there were 3 candidates, but now there were only 2 candidates. This meant that each of them had a 50% chance of becoming one of the 4 great generals. As for Leng Shiqi, they had already assumed that he did not exist. The next day, everyone gathered in the meeting hall again. When Leng Shiqi arrived, some people immediately pointed at him secretly. Leng Shiqi himself didn't think much of it, but his subordinates were filled with righteous indignation. Even eunuch Gao was worried that Leng Shiqi's mental state would be affected, so he comforted him. Leng Shiqi sized up Quan Jingji and Su Weiran quietly after he sat down. Quan Jingji sat there with his back ramrod straight. He looked like he didn't want anyone to come near him. Regardless of whether they supported him or opposed him, he ignored them all. Su Weiran, on the other hand, was much more normal. He was the most respected person here, second only to the 4 great generals. As such, he began to get along well with everyone present, causing some of the neutral parties to lean towards him. As for Leng Shiqi's side, it was very quiet. Even though eunuch Gao spent an entire day running around for him, he did not manage to get many people to join him. Most of them were his subordinates. Eunuch Gao leaned back in his chair. He did not seem to be acting strangely, as if he had already given up on the election. Leng Shiqi did not feel any dissatisfaction from eunuch Gao either. After all, eunuch Gao was appointed by the heavenly venerable Black Flame. No one dared to question or disobey the orders of the Grand Commander. If eunuch Gao was dissatisfied with Leng Shiqi, that meant that he was dissatisfied with the Grand Commander's arrangements. He knew which was more important. Not long after, Empyrean Black Flame arrived. Everyone immediately quieted down. Heavenly Venerable He Yen went straight to the point and said, "Today, we will elect the new 4 chief managers. The candidates are Quan Jingji, Su Weiran and Lu Xingji. Since the main purpose of this election is to test your ability and loyalty, we will first check your achievements in the past year." When they heard this condition, Quan Jingji and Su Weiran's expressions froze. Especially Su Weiran, who was beaming just now, instantly turned pale. Faint sounds of discussion could be heard in the conference hall. In the past, there would also be a segment to check the merit points, but that was to check the merit points of the past 5 years. The main purpose of checking your merit points was to see if you had slacked off recently. This was to prevent some people from sitting on the merit book and taking advantage of their seniority. But then again, after they reached the position of deputy general manager, there were almost no tasks that required them to carry out personally. As the deputy general manager, his job was to make decisions and manage the intelligence of the provinces and counties. How could he run around by himself? Of course, there were some mission maniacs who would carry out missions personally, such as Quan Jingji. Hence, everyone could accept the 5 years limit. However, Heavenly Venerable He Yin said that he wanted to check the merit points accumulated in the past year. This was beyond everyone's expectations. Furthermore, everyone looked at Leng Shiqi silently. He had only entered the headquarters of the Dark Thunder Guards for slightly more than a year. Wasn't Heavenly Venerable He Yin siding with him by setting such a rule? Many people began to feel dissatisfied in their hearts. Do you have any objections? Heavenly Venerable He Yin looked at everyone and said calmly. The conference hall instantly became abnormally silent. Even the atmosphere seemed to have frozen. Everyone was shaking their heads frantically. The great commander sitting in front of them was not a kind person. Back then, after he took over the great commander of the Dark Thunder Guards from the Li family's elder, he carried out a huge purge. His hands were stained with the blood of countless Dark Thunder Guards. Coupled with the matter of eliminating the Li family 2 days ago, everyone respected and feared Heavenly Venerable He Yin. Heavenly Venerable He Yin continued. The reason why I made such a request is not because I am biased towards anyone. I do not want my deputy general manager to spend his remaining years there. I do not want the new 4 general managers to be a hands-off shopkeeper. After these words were spoken, everyone felt that the Dark Thunder Guards were about to change again. After eliminating the Li family, Heavenly Venerable He Yin could be said to have complete control of the Dark Thunder Guards. The rules would probably have to be changed in the future. Everyone could not help but feel a little nervous. These are the missions and merit points that I have completed in the past year. Please take a look, Great Commander. At this moment, someone took the initiative to step forward with his own token. He was Quan Jingji. Su Weiran's expression darkened again. Everyone knew that Quan Jingji could not stay idle. As long as there was a mission that required him to do, he would do it. As such, even though he was the deputy general manager, it was rare to see him in the Dark Thunder Guards headquarters. One could imagine how many merit points he had accumulated in a year. However, Su Weiran was completely different. In the past year, he had spent most of his time dealing with important matters and socializing. His merit points were few and far between. However, since the great commander had already spoken, and Quan Jingji had already done so, what else could he do? Su Weiran also handed over his own token. He even took a look at Leng Shiqi. In his opinion, Leng Shiqi had only been in the Dark Thunder Guards headquarters for a year, and had only been the deputy general manager for less than a month. Leng Shiqi's merit points were definitely not as high as his, so he felt slightly better. At the very least, he was not at the bottom. As long as he won the voting segment by a huge margin, he still had a high chance of winning. However, when Leng Shiqi handed over his token, and the merit points of all 3 of them appeared, everyone could not help but gasp. They looked at Leng Shiqi in disbelief. As the junior with the least experience, Leng Shiqi had actually obtained more than 200,000 merit points in a short year. None of the envoy inspectors present would be able to accumulate so many merit points in their entire lives. In fact, Leng Shiqi had obtained these merit points from the missions in Shantai Prefecture, Ningyang Prefecture, and West Wilderness Prefecture. Especially the missions in Shantai Prefecture and Ningyang Prefecture, they were all huge contributions. That was why he had so many merit points. On the other hand, Quan Jingji had more than 190,000 merit points. Originally, he should have been the most shocking, but compared to Leng Shiqi, he was still slightly lacking. As for Su Weiran, he only had about 60,000 merit points. In fact, most of the deputy general managers had about the same amount of merit points in a year. However, to take it out in this situation was really embarrassing. In comparison, Su Weiran's face alternated between green and red. He wanted nothing more than to find a hole to hide in. He could even imagine that even if he became one of the 4 general managers in the future, he would become a laughingstock today. Chapter 691. Heavenly Venerable He Yan was slightly surprised by this result. In his opinion, Quan Jingji should have won this round. However, he was defeated by Leng Shiqi, who was a junior. He said, Lu Xingji won the merit competition. Next, it will be everyone's turn to vote. Manager Hai, you guys go first. There was no need to talk about who the 3 managers would vote for. The second round was for people above the rank of inspector to vote. These 3 managers' biggest role was to canvass for votes at the end. Manager Hai stood up and bowed slightly to Heavenly Venerable He Yan, then said, I vote for Deputy Manager Su Weiran. He has the highest seniority, and there is no need to doubt his ability. Not to mention that he was the patrol envoy for many years, ensuring the safety of one side. Later, he entered the headquarters of the Dark Thunder Guards, and made outstanding contributions. He was also cautious and conscientious when he became the deputy manager. He has never failed in any of the cases he handled. Furthermore, he also participated in the election of the 4 great managers last time. In the end, he was just a hair's breadth away. I only want to say 4 words, who else but him? Shen Tezhen immediately said, I don't think so. I admit that Su Weiran was indeed admirable in the past. Back then, I won against him because of luck. However, everyone could see that he only had a few tens of thousands of merit points in the past year. This was a little too unreasonable. However, Quan Jingji is different. Even though he doesn't have as many merit points as Lu Xingji, Quan Jingji's merit points are never less than 150,000. Even I can't guarantee that he can achieve this. Furthermore, what is the most important thing for a Dark Thunder Guard? That is to absolutely obey the rules of the Dark Thunder Guards, to obey the commander. Everyone here knows Quan Jingji's character very well. He has always been fair in handling matters. He has never cheated for personal gains. If such a person doesn't become one of the 4 great managers, who else is qualified? Finally, it was Eunuch Gao's turn. He was no longer half lying on the chair. Leng Shiqi had won the first round. Regardless of the final result, at least he had won back some face. This made Eunuch Gao very satisfied. He said leisurely, let's cut to the chase. Lu Xingji's merit points are enough to explain everything. Who among you can get more than 200,000 merit points in 1 year with the cultivation of Gang Spirit Realm? He looked around, but no one dared to meet his gaze. Eunuch Gao returned to his seat and didn't say another word. He did not say much, but the effect was very good. No one present could do what Leng Shiqi did. This showed the uniqueness and power of Leng Shiqi, as well as his terrifying potential. Steward Hai, Steward Shintu, and Eunuch Gao's words could be said to be more persuasive. Leng Shiqi and the other 2 indeed had their most praiseworthy sides. Now it was up to the others to choose. The only difference was that the others were elected anonymously, which meant that they would vote. Furthermore, the number of votes given to each position was also different. The inspector only had 1 vote, the eunuch had 2 votes, and the deputy general manager had 3 votes. Starting from the deputy general manager, everyone stepped forward one after another to vote. Although the process was hidden, everyone knew who had roped them in. As such, the corners of Su Weiran's mouth began to curl up. Compared to Quan Jingji and Leng Shiqi, he had a huge advantage in this aspect. The voting process was very fast. It was over in about 15 minutes. Heavenly Venerable He Yan stood up and said, the results are here. However, this is only the result of the first 2 rounds. It is only for reference. As for who will be the 4th Grand Manager, it is still up to His Majesty to decide. Then Heavenly Venerable He Yan entered the palace to meet His Majesty. However, no one left. They were all here to witness the birth of the new Grand Manager. Leng Shiqi won the first round of the merit points competition. If there were no surprises in the second round, Su Weiran would win. This made it seem like Quan Jingji had the least hope. Shen Tezhen's expression did not look too good. He also felt a little aggrieved for Quan Jingji. Quan Jingji had never been greedy for riches and pleasure. He had always been on the front lines of danger. If he lost to Su Weiran, then so be it. However, if he lost to Leng Shiqi, then it would be too much of a loss. Everyone else was also discussing. As the subject of discussion, Leng Shiqi was very calm. He even closed his eyes to rest. Eunuch Gao glanced at him, and closed his eyes as well. The two of them did not seem to fit in at all. On the other side, Heavenly Venerable He Yen reported the results to Lei Qingjun. Then, he retreated outside the palace to await his orders. As the commander of the Dark Lightning Guards, he could not interfere too much with the appointment of the 4 Grand Managers. Otherwise, Heavenly Venerable He Yen would not have allowed Li Jueqing to become one of the 4 Grand Managers. This was a method used by the royal family to prevent the Dark Lightning Guards from becoming a one-man show. The previous 4 Grand Managers included Eunuch Gao from the palace and Shen Tizhen, who had a military background. In the palace, Lei Qingjun looked at Heavenly Venerable He Yan's report. When he saw Su Weiran and Quan Zhengji's information, he was very casual. However, when he read Leng Shiqi's report, he read it very carefully. Then he passed the report to Eunuch Du, who was waiting beside him. Little Du, who do you think is more suitable for the 4 Grand Managers? Eunuch Du smiled flatteringly and said carefully, I do not dare to say anything. I just feel that Su Weiran and Quan Zhengji are more suitable. Why? Eunuch Du chose his words carefully. After all, Lu Xingji's experience is still shallow, and his cultivation base is still insufficient. Moreover, when he snatched the heavenly thunderfire bead in Void Scar Sky, it shows that he is bold and reckless, and somewhat young and frivolous. However, the second son is indeed a promising talent. If he is polished for a few more years, he may have the qualifications. Arrogant, Lei Qingjun said in a voice that only he could hear. Then he personally wrote an imperial edict and said, Go directly to the Dark Lightning Guards and announce the edict. Eunuch Du was stunned when he saw the name on the imperial edict. He raised his head in surprise and met Lei Qingjun's sharp gaze. He immediately knelt down and said, I will go now. Outside, Heavenly Venerable He Yen saw Eunuch Du walk out. Just as he was about to ask, Eunuch Du gestured for him to keep quiet and rushed to the headquarters of the Dark Lightning Guards at the fastest speed. At this moment, the meeting hall was quite lively. When Heavenly Venerable He Yen and Eunuch Du arrived, everyone hurriedly went up to greet them. They knew that the result was out. Eunuch Du took out the imperial edict and shouted with a sharp voice, By the will of the heavens, the Emperor decrees. The Deputy Grand Manager of the Dark Lightning Guards, the Great Supervisor of the Western Wilderness Province, Lu Xingji, is appointed as the new Grand Manager of the Dark Lightning Guards. End of the edict. After he finished reading the imperial edict, the entire meeting hall instantly fell into a dead silence. Everyone had an expression of disbelief. Chapter 692. No one had expected that His Majesty would appoint Lu Xingji, who was in Gang Spirit Realm, had the least experience and foundation, and had the least supporters, as the new 4 general managers. At this moment, most people even wondered whether His Majesty had made a mistake because of his old age. Of course, no one dared to say it out loud. Since the imperial edict had been issued, it was a foregone conclusion that no one could change. They had to admit that Leng Shiqi would become the new 4 great governors. Eunuch Du smiled and said, Lord Lu, come and receive the edict. Thank you, Your Majesty. Leng Shiqi received the imperial edict respectfully. At this moment, he had made the right bet. Leng Shiqi had been gambling since Lei Qingjun deliberately released the news of the Crown Prince in Hengtian. He was betting that Lei Qingjun would do something big before he died, so he snatched the heavenly thunderfire bead in Hengtian. It turned out that he had guessed correctly. He gave the heavenly thunderfire bead to Lei Qingjun first, and acted a little arrogantly in front of the princes and masters. This was to show Lei Qingjun that he was young. Being young meant that he had endless potential. It also meant that he could continue to be loyal to the Thunderfire dynasty for many years, and help Lei Qingjun to support the next emperor. Leng Shiqi was telling Lei Qingjun that he could protect the future of the Thunderfire dynasty. No matter who ascended the throne in the future, the high-level forces of the Thunderfire dynasty would do their best to replace him. On one hand, it was to prevent the nobles from having too many soldiers. On the other hand, it was to select younger talents for the new emperor, who had his own foundation. The appearance of Leng Shiqi made Lei Qingjun see the future. Therefore, he made an exception and gave him the position of 4 great governors. After receiving the imperial edict, Lung Shiqi's heart was truly relieved. After all, before this, everything was just his guess. However, no one could guarantee that Lei Qingjun would really think so. Until now, he was completely relieved. Thank you for your trouble. Eunuch Du, why don't you stay for a banquet before you leave? Lung Shiqi asked politely. Now that he had become one of the 4 chiefs, he would definitely hold a big banquet. Eunuch Du smiled and said, His Majesty is still waiting for me to return and report. I appreciate Lord Lu's kindness, but there will be plenty of opportunities in the future. I'll see Eunuch Du off. No, Lord Lu is one of the 4 great chiefs. I'm sure you have a lot of things to deal with. I'll take my leave first. After Eunuch Du left, Heavenly Sovereign He Yen ordered a banquet to be arranged to celebrate Lung Shiqi. However, people like Su Weiran and Quan Jingji would definitely not participate. In fact, there were some people who wanted to refuse, but after thinking about it, they remembered that Lung Shiqi was one of the 4 chiefs appointed by His Majesty. If he deliberately caused trouble for them in the future, it would be really troublesome. As such, they chose to stay. At the banquet, all of the Dark Thunder Guards had complicated expressions. After all, Lung Shiqi had only been in the Dark Thunder Guards headquarters for a short period of time. It had only been slightly more than a year since he had been promoted from the Envoy Inspector to the Deputy Chief to the 4 Great Chiefs. This could be said to be completely unprecedented. In just a year, it was already very fast to be promoted from the Envoy Inspector to the 4 Great Chiefs. For example, Wu Diao, who was sitting not far away from Lung Shiqi, had arrived at the Dark Thunder Guards headquarters at the same time. Wu Diao, as the winner of the Elite Society and the personal disciple of Chief Steward Shintu, was also very outstanding. However, he only had the opportunity to be promoted to the position of internal supervisor a few days ago after eliminating the Li family. On the other hand, Lung Shiqi had become one of the 4 great chiefs. At this moment, Wu Diao shook his head and drank his wine. As he drank, he muttered to himself, "Comparisons are odious." Chief Shintu and Chief Hai were also unhappy. Lung Shiqi was considered a junior among juniors to them, but now he was on equal footing with them. However, on the surface, they were still full of smiles. They were all saying that Lung Shiqi was young and promising, and had a bright future. As for Eunuch Gao, he didn't hide his joy for a long time. Although he didn't expect Lung Shiqi to become one of the 4 great chiefs, Eunuch Gao thought deeper. What was the purpose of His Majesty personally appointing Lung Shiqi? Moreover, Lung Shiqi was Eunuch Gao's disciple. Now that the master and disciple were both the 4 great chiefs, it was reasonable to say that Lei Qingjun wouldn't make such an arrangement. The only possibility was that His Majesty really valued Lung Shiqi. What really made Eunuch Gao happy was that he could finally sit firmly in his position as the 4 great chiefs. The reason why he had spent so much effort to cultivate his own faction was to protect himself during the change of power, and at the same time, to retain the greatest power. Now that Lung Shiqi was one of the 4 great chiefs, he had a lot of power in the Dark Thunder Guards. With him and his disciple working together, even if they didn't have as deep a foundation as the Li family, they could at least keep their position as the 4 great chiefs. Eunuch Gao could also foresee that after the new emperor ascended the throne, he would no longer be able to keep his position in the palace. Of course, he didn't want to stay in the palace and wait for the new emperor. It was better this way. After the banquet, Lung Shiqi and Eunuch Gao returned to the cold nether pavilion. Eunuch Gao praised, "So you were already paving the way for yourself before you entered Void Scar. I have to say, your vision is very far-sighted." "Master, you flatter me. I was just lucky," Lung Shiqi said humbly. "You are now one of the 4 great chiefs. You can sit on equal footing with me. There is no need to be so polite." "I don't dare." Lung Shiqi immediately shook his head and said, "As the saying goes, a teacher for a day is a teacher for life. I will never forget your care and support for me." Hearing this, even though Eunuch Gao knew that Lung Shiqi didn't really mean it, he still felt a little comforted in his heart. He was right about him. "Well, we don't need to be so polite. Next, I want to talk about some important things." Speaking of this, his expression became solemn. "First of all, although you are one of the 4 great chiefs, you have taken over Li Jueqing's position. However, most of the 9 eastern counties under Li Juecheng's supervision have been divided between me and Supervisor Hai. Therefore, you don't have much power now. You have to be prepared. Leng Shiqi chuckled and said, Master, don't worry. I have some self-awareness. Not to mention other things, my cultivation in the middle stage of Gang Spirit Realm is not enough to deter people. If I force myself to have too much power, it will only bring trouble to myself. Eunuch Gao was very satisfied with Leng Shiqi's attitude. After all, he had also robbed Leng Shiqi of a lot of power. Now you can only supervise 3 counties, but your influence is not small. There are more than a dozen masters in the oneness of heaven and men realm under you. You don't have to worry about whether they will obey you or not. I will help you with this. In addition, tomorrow you will set off to Pinghui County to participate in the extermination of the Thousand Illusion Sword sect. Today is different from the past. This is your first task as one of the 4 great chiefs. There must be no mistakes. Now that Pinghui County has been robbed by Supervisor Hai, this is a good opportunity for you to regain Pinghui County. You have to seize it well. In order to make you more confident, this time you can bring 2 more masters in the oneness of heaven and men realm to help you. There is no time to lose. I will take you to your post now. With me around, no one will dare to mess around. Many thanks, Master. After that, Leng Shiqi went through all the necessary procedures, and finally obtained the identity token of the 4 great chiefs. He put on the special black and red official uniform of the 4 great chiefs. It was imprinted with thunder and fire patterns. This uniform itself was a level 6 spirit tool. After he put it on, he looked even more heroic. In the headquarters of the Dark Thunder Guard, the place that was originally occupied by the Li family was now owned by Leng Shiqi. He directly moved the name of Xingji Pavilion over. At the same time, the envoy inspectors and eunuch envoys who had been following him all this time also followed. They could be considered his most original team. After being busy for almost an entire day, the new Xingji Pavilion was completed in the evening. There were dozens of people standing in 3 rows in the conference hall. These people were his 3 deputy general managers, 14 internal supervisor envoys, and 70 to 80 envoy inspectors. This force was enough to destroy any first-rate sect, and it could be easily done. Leng Shiqi walked into the hall, and sat on the throne in the middle. Everyone simultaneously knelt down and shouted, Greetings, Chief Supervisor Liu. Chapter 693. Looking at the masters kneeling in front of him, it was impossible for Leng Shiqi to be calm. But he didn't become arrogant and tried to control his emotions. Please get up. We are all on the same side. You don't have to be so polite in the future. An old man standing at the front cupped his hands and said, This humble one is Ren Yi. We congratulate Chief Steward Liu on his appointment. We finally have a pillar of support. 2 days ago, the headquarters of Dark Thunder Guards purged the forces of the Li family, including Li Juj and the 4th uncle of the Li family. A total of 6 deputy directors, and more than 20 eunuchs were killed. The people who could still stand here were somewhat special. They were either people who had been hidden away by Li Jucheng, or some old guys who didn't have many days left, or people who had just entered the headquarters of the Dark Thunder Guards and hadn't completely submitted to Li Jucheng. For example, the 3 deputy directors in front of Leng Shiqi were all gray-haired old men. Their qi and blood began to decline, and their combat effectiveness was getting worse and worse. There were also several old men among the 14 eunuchs. Basically, these people could only deal with things. Leng Shiqi couldn't help but feel a little headache. It seemed that he didn't have many real top fighting forces in his hands. In addition to these old men, there were only 8 masters in the realm of oneness of heaven and men, because 2 of the eunuchs were in the realm of Gang Spirit, who had just entered the headquarters of Dark Thunder Guards, and had good potential. Most of the 8 masters in the realm of oneness of heaven and men were in the early stage of oneness of heaven and men, and only 2 of them were in the middle stage. In fact, this kind of strength was very strong in any place in the world. But compared with the other 3 directors, it was too weak. The strength in one's hands determined the right to speak in Dark Thunder Guards. At present, Leng Shiqi was only a little stronger than the deputy directors, but he was still too weak in front of Eunuch Gao and others. Therefore, Leng Shiqi had two priorities. One was to accumulate great merits and cultivate a team as soon as possible, and completely gain a foothold in Dark Thunder Guards. The other was to improve his cultivation and strength. Only when he became stronger could he be truly powerful. Leng Shiqi said to Ren Yi and the others, "I will be setting off for Pinghui County tomorrow. I will need 2 Oneness of Heaven Realm experts to accompany me. I wonder who is willing to go." At that moment, other than the few old men who had lost their vigor, the other 8 Unity of Heaven Realm cultivators all stood out. "Your humble servant is willing to go." They all knew that the Eastern Suppression Thunderflame Army and the Imperial Family's Hall of Worship were the main forces in the destruction of the Thousand Illusionary Sword sect. The Dark Lightning Guards were, at most, responsible for providing intelligence and sealing off information. It could be said that they were there to gain merits and experience. Of course, anyone would want to go there. Leng Shiqi had expected this. He said, "I don't know much about you, but time is tight. How about this? The 2 with the highest cultivation will follow me." Subordinate Yen Ming, accept the order. Subordinate Deng Xinlei accepts the order. The 2 of them were overjoyed and immediately bowed to receive their orders. As for the others, they couldn't say anything. Cultivation was their biggest advantage, and they couldn't blame others for their cultivation being inferior to theirs. On the surface, Yen Ming didn't look old and was quite handsome. However, he had a full beard, which made him look somewhat melancholic. As for Deng Xinlei, he looked like a carefree person. Leng Shiqi turned his head and ordered, "During this period of time when I'm not at the headquarters, Deputy Chief Ren Yi will be in charge of managing everything in the Xingji Pavilion." "Rest assured, my lord. Your humble servant will definitely manage the Xingji Pavilion well." Ren Yi knew that his strength was deteriorating, but he was still very confident in managing things. Leng Shiqi nodded and dismissed everyone, telling them to do what they needed to do. In fact, it was extremely disadvantageous for him to be away from the imperial capital right after he was promoted to chieftain. This was equivalent to losing the best opportunity to cultivate his trusted subordinates. However, he had already accepted the mission to destroy the Thousand Illusionary Sword sect. Moreover, he really did want to make a trip to the Thousand Illusionary Sword sect and take back the authority to supervise Pinghui County. Thus, this trip was unavoidable. Fortunately, even if he left, the Xingji Pavilion still had a group of people he brought over. Above him, there was also Eunuch Gao at the headquarters to help him take care of things, so there shouldn't be any problems. After dealing with all this, Leng Shiqi locked himself in the secret chamber. After becoming one of the 4 great chiefs, he realized that his cultivation was far from matching his current status. It was imperative that he improve his strength. Then, with a thought, he was teleported into the underworld and took out a mustard seed bracelet. This was Li Jueqing's mustard seed bracelet. Previously, he was afraid that there was a restriction in this mustard seed bracelet, so he didn't dare to open it. Now that he was in the underworld, he wasn't afraid even if there was a restriction. Leng Shiqi's mental power probed inside. As expected, it was blocked by a layer of power. He snorted coldly, and the sword of primordial spirit appeared and directly broke the restriction. However, the contents of the mustard seed bracelet immediately made Leng Shiqi lose his mind. It wasn't that he had never seen a huge amount of resources. When he found the Star Clan's secret treasure in Ningyang County, he also saw resources that were enough to shock the world. However, the resources in Li Jueqing's mustard seed bracelet could no longer be described as huge. It could be described as a moving treasure trove. The Star Clan's secret treasure trove only contained ores and materials. However, this mustard seed bracelet contained all kinds of resources. As long as one could think of it, it had it all. They were even piled up into small mountains. Spiritual stones, elixirs, spiritual weapons, heavenly materials and earthly treasures, formations, mystical items, and even cultivation methods and spiritual skills were all piled up in piles. Leng Shiqi was dazzled and overwhelmed. These resources were enough to support a top sect. It was obvious how much resources Li Jueqing had gathered over the years. After a long while, Leng Shiqi came back to his senses. Now that these resources were all his, he could confidently say that he didn't have to worry about resources anymore. Lung Shiqi collected his thoughts and first looked at the various cultivation methods and spiritual skills inside. Most of them were level 5 cultivation methods and above. There were even a few level 7 cultivation methods. There was even a level 8 cultivation method. Lung Shiqi's face lit up with joy. He took it out and wrote the words 16 days transformation method on it. Seeing these words, Lung Shiqi's expression changed. He had heard of this cultivation method before. This was the cultivation method that the Li family's patriarch had created back then. The Li family's patriarch did not have a teacher. After joining the Dark Thunder Guards, he cultivated many cultivation methods. Later, he took a different path and created an extremely profound cultivation method, which was the 16 days transformation method. The 16 days transformation method was both a cultivation method and a spiritual skill. It was all-encompassing. The Li family's patriarch had combined all kinds of spiritual skills into one extremely powerful move. They were fist, palm, finger, leg, saber, sword, staff, spear, halberd, axe, earth, water, wind, fire, defense, and demon. Moreover, each of these spiritual skills was a rank 7 spiritual skill. Among them, Lung Shiqi had seen the mountain suppression, blade array, calling the wind, turning the cloud, and demon transformation. The Li family's patriarch's method was somewhat similar to Lung Shiqi's. However, Lung Shiqi relied on the system while the Li family's patriarch did not. From this, it could be seen that the Li family's patriarch was indeed an extremely talented person. Unfortunately, the Li family's descendants were not much. Even though there were a few experts, even Li Jucheng had only cultivated a few spiritual skills from the 16 days transformation method. In Lung Shiqi's hands, this cultivation method was actually used to its fullest potential. He simply used his unlimited skill points to cultivate all 16 spiritual skills to great perfection. Mastering 16 rank 7 spiritual skills caused Lung Shiqi's strength to soar. It also increased his chances of participating in the destruction of the Thousand Illusion Sword sect and seizing Pinghui County. Chapter 694. In order to increase his confidence, Lung Shiqi took out a pile of things and placed them in front of him. There were more than 300 black grasses, 2 Tiangang pills, a blood-colored insect that was as thin as a hair, and the Yin-Yang Spirit Gathering formation. He was going to break through to the 7th level of Gang Spirit Realm before going to Pinghui Prefecture. After he cultivated the rank 8 cultivation method, 16 days transformation's true solution, his cultivation had also increased by a portion. He was prepared to refine the remaining 300-plus black grass and swallow the Heavenly Dipper pill to make a breakthrough. To ensure that nothing went wrong, he even took out a strange object called the Fiend Blood Thread Worm. It was found in Li Juecheng's mustard seed bracelet. It was something for Gang Spirit Realm cultivators to quickly break through their cultivation. However, this evil Gang Blood nematode also had a huge drawback. That was, it would affect the mind of the refiner. If one was not careful, one would be bitten by the evil spirit and suffer from Qigong deviation. Therefore, few people would use such an extreme method, unless they were forced to. Of course, this didn't matter to Lung Shiqi. He had too many things on him that could suppress baleful aura. Besides, his evil spirit was horrible, so it was impossible for him to be bitten by the evil spirit of a small insect. After preparing all this, Lung Shiqi waved his hand, and a total of 1,000 mid-grade spiritual stones were embedded in the Yin-Yang Gathering formation. Suddenly, the special spiritual power of the underworld swarmed in. Finally, he swallowed 2 Tiangang pills and the evil blood threadworm at the same time. The spiritual power in his body was surging, but it was all led into the Star Sea and turned into his cultivation. In the process, he constantly used the black mark to absorb the power of the mysterious grass. His spiritual power cultivation was growing at a speed visible to the naked eye. About 12 hours later, Lung Shiqi's body flashed with various colors of Gang spirit. The spiritual power within a few miles was constantly stirred, and his spiritual power suddenly soared. The 7th level of Gang Spirit Realm. Lung Shiqi exhaled a mouthful of turbid air, and a smile appeared on his face. The breakthrough was very smooth. Although there was only one level between the 6th level and the 7th level of Gang Spirit Realm, the gap between them was very big. The biggest difference was the thickness of Gang spirit. He used his fingers as a sword, and an illusory spirit sword energy that was more than 100 meters long shot out. Even he was shocked by it. In his impression, even Yan Mu, who was at level 9 of Gang spirit realm in the Thousand Illusion Sword sect, could only reach this level with a level 7 spiritual sword. This was the most direct benefit of having a deep spiritual energy foundation. Although he had just broken through to the 7th level of Gang spirit realm, the thickness of his Gang spirit was stronger than that of the 9th level of Gang spirit realm. Kid, how is it that your strength can always improve so easily? Nine Leaves' voice suddenly rang out. This also made Lung Shiqi's heart skip a beat. When he entered the underworld, he had inadvertently brought Nine Leaf with him. How was he going to explain this to Nine Leaf? As expected, Nine Leaf immediately asked, where is this place? Lung Shiqi was going to give a perfunctory answer, but he suddenly remembered that there were 3 conditions for the underworld to level up again. They were to recruit 3 members of the underworld, collect 2 high-level souls, and have 40,000 system coins. When he was in the Void Scar Sky, he had already taken Yushu and Ming Ming into the underworld. Not long ago, he killed Li Jueqing and collected a high-level soul. If he pulled Nine Leaf into the underworld, he would meet most of the conditions for leveling up. Originally, he was going to invite Wu Diao or Di Chuan, but now he thought that Nine Leaf might be a better choice. First of all, he and Nine Leaf had signed an equal blood contract. They could not harm each other, so there was some guarantee. Moreover, he and Nine Leaf had always gotten along in the form of a deal. Although they did not completely trust each other, they still had at least credibility. He immediately said, "To tell you the truth, this is a small secret realm that I obtained by chance. I used this secret realm as the foundation to create a force called the Underworld. I would like to invite Senior Nine Leaf to join the Underworld." You actually obtained a secret realm. Your luck is really enviable. Nine Leaf said in surprise. As for whether I join your force or not, I don't care. As long as the benefits are there, everything is negotiable. Hearing this condition, Lung Shiqi smiled inwardly. If there was one thing that he did not lack now, it would be resources. Without another word, he took out a small portion of high-level materials that were suitable for Nine Leaf from his mustard seed bracelet, including several rank 6 Yao cores. Nine Leaf immediately agreed with a smile. Lung Shiqi took Nine Leaf into the underworld through the territory system and said, "Senior Nine Leaf, the underworld also has a mysterious power. All members of the underworld will receive a legacy power. Senior, you should show your true body and see what kind of legacy you can obtain." Oh, there's such a good thing. Nine Leaf's soul came out and returned to her true body. However, she did not take the legacy that Lung Shiqi mentioned too seriously. After all, Nine Leaf's true body was a precious Yao beast with inherited memories. Human legacies were not of much use to her. After Nine Leaf's true body appeared, Lung Shiqi raised his head and looked in the direction of Fengdu City. After a few breaths, purple Yao Qi surged towards him. Nine Leaf was also shocked by this movement. She subconsciously wanted to dodge, but Lung Shiqi immediately shouted, "Senior, don't move." Nine Leaf hesitated for a moment, but still chose to believe in Lung Shiqi. Immediately after, Yao Qi shrouded Nine Leaf, and at the same time, that familiar voice sounded again. Title: Ghost Emperor Yao Yi of the Northern Wasteland. Ghost Emperor. Lung Shiqi looked at Nine Leaf, who was wrapped in Yao Qi. She received the title of Ghost Emperor of the 5 Directions on the same level as Delta Origi. However, this Ghost Emperor Yao Yi of the Northern Wasteland was not the only one in his memory. After the inheritance of Delta Origi and Nine Leaf, Lung Shiqi guessed that the underworld would give different titles according to a person's potential and characteristics. It could also be said that the underworld would give the most suitable title for you. While Nine Leaf was receiving the inheritance, Lung Shiqi directly went to find Li Jueqing's soul, and turned Li Jueqing into his own ghost slave. When this ghost slave was formed, he had the strength of the late stage of Gang Spirit Realm. It seemed that the strength of a ghost slave was indeed closely related to his previous cultivation. If Li Zhongtao and Li Juning were counted, his current 3 ghost slaves were all masters of the unity of heaven and men realm of the Li family. The Li family had been trying to kill Lin Shiqi. Now he was not dead, but the Li family was destroyed first. Even the strongest members of the Li family had become his ghost slave. It had to be said that this was a great irony. Then Lin Shiqi looked at the requirements for upgrading the underworld. The current level of the territory of the underworld, Stage 3. The requirements for upgrading the territory of the underworld. 1. Recruit 3 members of the underworld, March 3rd. 2. Collect 2 high-level souls, 12 thirds. 3. 40,000 system coins. He murmured. Now there is only 1 high-level soul left to upgrade. Let's do this in Pinghui Prefecture. Chapter 695. The next morning Lin Shiqi took Yan Ming and Deng Xinlei, 2 masters of oneness of heaven and men, to the interfield transmission formation of the imperial capital. When they came in, a large number of people knelt down. Greetings, Supervisor Liu. The news of Lin Shiqi becoming the new chief steward of the 4 great generals spread throughout the entire imperial city in a single night. Everyone who heard this news almost dropped their jaws in shock. No one dared to believe it, and many people even doubted the authenticity of the news. It was not until the Imperial Palace and the headquarters of the Dark Thunder Guards issued the appointment at the same time that people had to believe it. His Majesty really chose a junior of Gang Spirit Realm to be the 4 supervisors. For a time, Lin Shiqi became the center of discussion in the imperial capital. Some slandered him, some envied him, and many people were guessing what Lei Qingjuan's intention was. But no matter how others looked down on him and thought that he was not worthy of the position, he was now the 4 supervisors of the Dark Thunder Guards, and he had the power to kill countless people. Anyone who saw him had to kneel down and salute him even if they were unwilling. Lin Shiqi waved his hand casually and said, "Get up." However, they did not directly transmit to Pinghui Prefecture, but stopped here to wait for a person. Soon, a man in shabby clothes with messy hair and white beard, who looked like he had not bathed for several months, came in. He looked around and reached out to rub the dust off his body. When he saw Lin Shiqi, he immediately walked over. "You are Lu Xingji, right? Just call me old man. Let's go to Pinghui Prefecture." Lin Shiqi looked at the man suspiciously. Was this old man the master of Imperial Hall of Worship, who went to Pinghui Prefecture with him to destroy the Thousand Illusion Sword sect? An expert of Tianyuan realm? This was not the same as those high and mighty experts of Tianyuan realm he had seen before. But now there were not many people who dared to call him by his name, and others did not know that he was going to Pinghui Prefecture. So from this point of view, this old man might really be an expert of Tianyuan realm. To be on the safe side, Lin Shiqi walked over and cupped his hands. Just as he was about to speak, he suddenly didn't know how to address the other party. Did she really call him old man? He simply said, "Senior, you must be an expert from the Imperial Hall of Worship." "There's no need to call me senior. Just call me old man. I don't dare to call myself an expert. Killing an old fart like the Thousand Illusion Swordmaster is not a problem." Lin Shiqi's eyes twitched. The Thousand Illusion Sword Master was the great elder of the Thousand Illusion Sword sect, the only Sky Origin Stage cultivator. Good heavens! A Sky Origin Stage cultivator has become an old bastard in the old man's mouth. Kill him as he pleases? Were all the experts of the imperial family's Hall of Worship this arrogant? However, this also confirmed that this person was indeed an expert who had participated in the destruction of the Thousand Illusion Sword sect. Lin Shiqi did not dare to be negligent. He also remembered that Eunuch Gao had said that this person had some relationship with him, but he did not know what that relationship was. Don't be long-winded. Let's hurry to Pinghui Prefecture. The old man pulled Lin Shiqi into the interdomain transfer formation. He seemed to be quite amiable. Lin Shiqi suppressed his doubts and said to the person in charge of activating the transfer formation, "Begin the transfer." Yes. Immediately, the transfer formation rotated and Lin Shiqi and the other 3 figures gradually disappeared. In an instant, they arrived at Pinghui Prefecture, which was tens of thousands of miles away. However, the interdomain transfer formation was not built in Pinghui Prefecture. It was built in a city at the edge of Pinghui Prefecture. This city was connected to 2 other prefectures, so it was very convenient to go anywhere. The four of them did not disturb the people here. Instead, they walked out of the city. As the old man walked, he suddenly turned his head and said, "I heard that you can fly?" Lung Shiqi nodded and said, "I do have the means to fly." "That's good. Let's see who can fly faster with each of us carrying one person." As soon as the old man finished speaking, he pulled Yanming and flew away. In the blink of an eye, only a black shadow was left. Lung Shiqi was stunned for a moment, and did not react. Flying speed? What was going on? The brain circuit of a sky origin stage expert is too strange. Lung Shiqi muttered to himself. Then he pulled Deng Xinlei and spread out 2 pairs of colorful wings behind him and soared into the sky. Soaring above the 9 heavens, Lung Shiqi's speed was extremely fast. Soon, he would catch up with the old man. Sky origin stage experts were able to fly because they could still control a certain degree of heaven and earth. Wherever they were, they could claim to be a part of heaven and earth. Flying in the air was not a problem. However, unless they were people who specialized in flying, most of the sky origin stage experts were not very fast. Gradually, the old man was about to be caught up. The old man also felt that Lung Shiqi was slowly approaching. He suddenly felt a little embarrassed. The corner of his mouth curled up into a smile. In an instant, there were dark clouds everywhere, thunder rumbled, and endless thunder from the 9 heavens raged. Lung Shiqi was flying at an extremely fast speed when he suddenly plunged into the thunderclouds. He was shocked at first, but he realized that the power of these thunderbolts was not particularly strong, so he knew that the old man did not really want to make a move. He immediately activated the wild demon blood beast body and the golden light indestructible divine art. Terrifying thunderbolts struck his body and immediately produced a clang-clang sound, but they could not hurt him at all. Unfortunately, Deng Xinlei was knocked out by the sudden thunderbolt. Lung Shiqi had to use the purple pole thunderstorm to form a lightning field around Deng Xinlei to protect him. The 4 wings on his back shook, and in a few breaths, he forced his way out of the thundercloud. As soon as Lung Shiqi left the thundercloud, the sound of clapping hands could be heard. Clap, clap, clap. The old man stood 3,000 feet in the sky and clapped his hands as he watched Lung Shiqi pass through the thundercloud unscathed. Yanming floated beside him in a coma. The old man praised, "Not bad, not bad." As expected of the leader of the elite association. You did not lose face for the elite hall. Elite hall? Lung Shiqi was puzzled. He guessed that the old man did not really want to attack him, but he had never heard of the name Elite Hall. The old man raised his hand and threw over something that looked like a token. Lung Shiqi caught it in his hand. It was a token with the word Elite engraved on it. The old man explained, "This is the identity token of the Elite Hall. It's normal that you haven't heard of the Elite Hall before, because there are less than 100 people who know about the Elite Hall. Only the previous leaders of the Elite Association are qualified to join this Elite Hall." Lung Shiqi's heart skipped a beat. If this was the case, then the old man in front of him was also the leader of the Elite Association of a certain session. No wonder Eunuch Gao said that he had some relationship with the old man. "Yes, I was the leader of the Elite Association of 42 years ago," the old man said proudly. Of course, not every leader of the Elite Association is qualified to join the Elite Hall. Even if you are at the late stage of Gang Spirit Realm at a young age, and have become one of the 4 directors, you still have to pass my test. Although I don't mobilize the chi of heaven and earth, it is not something that an ordinary oneness of heaven and men realm can survive. However, you can pass through my thundercloud dimming formation so safely. It can be seen that you are worthy of your reputation. Speaking of this, the old man pointed to Yanming and Deng Xinlei who had fainted and continued. "You have the strength not weaker than the late stage of oneness of heaven and men realm in Gang Spirit Realm, and you are in a high position. Only then are you really qualified to join the Elite Association." Chapter 696. Lung Shiqi did not stand on ceremony and accepted the Elite Hall's token. According to the old man, those who could enter the Elite Hall were almost all abnormal people. Even if he just casually made friends with a few of them, it would still be very beneficial. Just as he thought of this, the old man pointed a finger at Lung Shiqi. and a bolt of lightning entered between his eyebrows. A chant immediately appeared in his mind. It was the 7th level spiritual skill, Purple Lightning Punishment All. This is my greeting gift to you. It's not anything good, so don't mind it, the old man said casually. Lung Shiqi did not expect that the old man could casually throw out a rank 7 spiritual skill. One had to know that a rank 7 spiritual skill was a treasure that would be fought over anywhere. It could even become the most precious treasure of a first-rate faction. This further proved that the elite hall's potential was terrifying. Thank you, senior. Lung Shiqi cupped his fists. The old man revealed a dissatisfied expression. If you continue to call me senior, I will really get angry. The people in the elite hall all call each other brothers. They don't care about the red tape. You can just call me brother. Thank you, brother. Lung Shiqi said these words awkwardly. The old man laughed and put his arm around Lung Shiqi's shoulder. That's right. Let's quickly destroy the 1000 Illusion Sword sect. If there is a chance in the future, I will introduce you to the other brothers in the elite hall. Oh right, the elite hall is a hidden faction. Don't tell others about it so easily. Brother, don't worry. I know what to do. That's good. Next, I will go to the 1000 Illusion Sword sect to guard it in case that old man, 1000 Illusion Sword Sovereign, plays any tricks. The old man did not even finish speaking before he flew away. Lung Shiqi shrugged. This old man's temper seemed a little strange. However, after interacting with him for a short period of time, he did not have to be so cautious. He had not felt this way in a long time. He did not want to delay important matters, so he brought Yan Ming and Deng Xinlei and flew towards Pinghui City. It was not until sunset that the three of them arrived at Pinghui City. At this time, Yan Ming and Deng Xinlei were following behind Lung Shiqi with gloomy faces. They had fainted for no reason and felt very embarrassed. When Lung Shiqi walked to the entrance of Pinghui City's Dark Thunder Manor, there were already hundreds of people gathered here. When they saw Lung Shiqi, who was dressed in a black and red official robe, they all knelt down and shouted, "Greetings, Chief Steward Liu. No need to be so courteous. Who is the patrol inspector of Pinghui County?" Lung Shiqi asked. The person standing at the very front replied, "This humble one is Wu Yijing, the patrol inspector of the Dark Thunder Guards of Pinghui County. You used to work for Li Jueqing?" Wu Yi's heart skipped a beat. The new general manager didn't welcome them or ask about the 1000 Illusions Sword sect. Instead, he asked this question. It seemed like he didn't come with good intentions. Wu Yi smiled and said, "In reply to my lord, the previous patrol inspector was dismissed a few days ago. This humble one also just took up the post." Lung Shiqi narrowed his eyes. He secretly thought that Chief Steward Hai's actions were really fast. He continued to ask, "Then do you know which general manager is in charge of Pinghui County?" Wu Yi was speechless. According to the scope of supervision, Pinghui County was indeed under Lung Shiqi's supervision. However, 2 days ago, Chief Steward Hai had already taken over the supervision of Pinghui County. He, Wu Yi, could also be considered one of Chief Steward Hai's people. However, he didn't dare to say such words in front of Lung Shiqi. He had specially inquired about Lung Shiqi's character, and knew that he was a person who would seek revenge for the smallest grievance, and couldn't tolerate sand in his eyes. No matter how weak Lung Shiqi was, he was still one of the 4 general managers. If he really angered him, he definitely wouldn't have a good time. Wu Yi unknowingly broke out in a layer of cold sweat. It was really uncomfortable for him to be sandwiched between the 2 general managers. At this time, a spirit cultivator at the early stage of unity of heaven and man realm behind Wu Yi stepped forward and said, "Chief Steward Liu, this subordinate thinks that the most important thing right now is to assist the East Guarding Thunder Flame Army to destroy the 1000 Illusionary Sword sect. Please enter the residence to discuss important matters." He came to help, but Lung Shiqi's eyes flashed with a cold light. This person looks a little familiar. The person smiled and said, "Lord Liu, this subordinate was originally a eunuch under Chief Steward Hai, Zhang Hesu. Now I have been transferred to Pinghui County." "Then what position do you hold now?" Zhang Hesu opened his mouth, but didn't know what to say. In fact, he was sent by Chief Steward Hai to supervise. To put it bluntly, he was an imperial envoy. However, in reality, He didn't have any position. This subordinate hasn't received a position yet. In the end, he braced himself and said it. Lung Shiqi snorted coldly. With a flip of his hand, the sky suddenly darkened and a terrifying spiritual pressure suddenly appeared. Everyone raised their heads in shock. It turned out that a huge mountain had suddenly appeared in the sky. It was shining with boundless golden light as it slowly descended, as if it was suppressing everything. 16 days transformation truth, mountain suppression. Everyone was stunned for a moment. How could this Lord Lu make a move just like that? And looking at this posture, it was not a spiritual technique that a spirit cultivator of the spirit gang realm could use. Wu Yi was the first to react. He pulled back and shouted at the same time, "Retreat, retreat quickly." Fortunately, the speed of the mountain falling was not fast. Everyone activated their spiritual power, and finally ran out of the range of the mountain. Zhang Hesu also wanted to escape, but he couldn't. Zhang Hesu was about to turn around and escape, but there was a terrible gravity at the bottom of the mountain. All of a sudden, his legs sank deep into the ground. He suddenly couldn't move. In horror, he immediately mobilized the spiritual power of heaven and earth around him to try to break free. However, a mysterious starry sky formation appeared at the bottom of the mountain. The spiritual power that Zhang Hesu had just gathered dissipated without a trace. Zhang Hesu's eyes widened. He was really stunned. He was a master of the unity of heaven and man realm, but he was powerless in front of Lung Shiqi, who was in the spirit gang realm. What made him even more frightened was that he saw Lung Shiqi's eyes were full of murderous intent. Zhang Hesu only realized at this moment that Lung Shiqi wanted to kill him. "No. Lord Lu, you can't kill." However, before he could even finish his sentence, the gigantic mountain peak had already crashed down, causing the entire Pinghui city to tremble violently. Zhang Hesu's corpse was instantly obliterated. Even the Dark Thunder Mansion in the Pinghui prefecture was turned into ruins under this blow. Many Dark Thunder guards and all the people in the city looked at all this in horror. People who didn't know the situation thought that someone had come to attack Pinghui city. And the Dark Thunder guards, including Wu Yi, were even more shocked. Lung Shiqi, with the cultivation of the late stage of the spirit gang realm, killed a spirit cultivator of the unity of heaven and man realm in seconds. This level of battle prowess was too terrifying. Lung Shiqi clapped his hands as if he was driving away a fly. "Do you have the right to speak here?" Chapter 697. Lung Shiqi's killing of Zhang and Su shocked everyone, including Yan Ming and Deng Xinlei who came with him. At this moment, they finally understood why Lung Shiqi was qualified to be one of the 4 directors. He was so powerful at the late stage of gang spirit realm. When Lung Shiqi broke through the oneness of heaven and men realm, he would have the power comparable to the late stage of oneness of heaven and men realm. What would happen when his cultivation reached the late stage of oneness of heaven and men realm? Both of them secretly sucked in a breath of cold air, and didn't dare to think about it anymore. However, in their hearts, there was no longer any disrespect for Lung Shiqi. Lung Shiqi stepped on the ruins of Dark Thunder Mansion, and came to Wu Yi. He asked the question he had asked before. "Do you know which director is in charge of Pinghui Prefecture?" Wu Yi also had the cultivation of the middle stage of oneness of heaven and men realm, and was now the inspector. However, when he was asked by Lung Shiqi, his body trembled. Zhang and Su were not only masters of oneness of heaven and men realm, but also trusted subordinates of Director Hai. Lung Shiqi killed them without any hesitation. He really didn't care about Director Hai at all. He took a deep breath and said, "It belongs to Director Lu." "Very good." Lung Shiqi patted Wu Yi on the shoulder and said, "Order people to clean up a place and prepare for the meeting." Wu Yi stiffly turned around and gave the order. In just a quarter of an hour, a decent meeting hall had been built. Lung Shiqi sat on the high seat and said, "Tell me, what's the situation now?" Wu Yi bowed slightly and said, "Your Excellency, the Eastern Thunder Flame Army has entered Pinghui Prefecture in succession these 2 days. Under the cover of the Dark Thunder Guards, they have scattered and hidden near the Thousand Illusion Sword Sect. In addition, the city guards around the Discipline Commission and the Thousand Illusion Sword Sect are ready to attack at any time. As long as General Lin, one of the 3 generals of the Eastern Thunder Flame Army, and the masters of the Imperial Hall of Worship arrive, they can attack the Thousand Illusion Sword Sect at any time. Yes. Leng Shiqi nodded. It seemed that Wu Yi was quite capable. He had almost done everything. However, Leng Shiqi was still a little worried. After all, the Thousand Illusionary Sword Sect was a top sect that had been famous for a long time. It was definitely not something that could be destroyed so easily. He asked, "Are there any other problems that have not been resolved?" "My lord, there are 2 headaches right now." Wu Yi stretched out 2 fingers. "First of all, because we've kept the information confidential, the Thousand Illusionary Sword Sect has yet to notice the impending crisis. Therefore, there were also some disciples who went out to do things or went down the mountain to gain experience. These people were quite a lot. There were at least 1,000 of them. If they were not eliminated, there would be trouble in the future. Although I have already ordered my subordinates to search for the disciples of the Thousand Illusion Sword Sect, I only know the whereabouts of 70% of them. Furthermore, these people are scattered all over the place. Some of them aren't even in Pinghui County. It will be difficult to eliminate them all." When Leng Shiqi heard this, a thoughtful look appeared on his face. It was indeed difficult to track down all the external disciples. The Dark Lightning Guard's information network was spread all over the place, but they had limited manpower. The best way to solve this problem was to have the Thousand Illusionary Sword Sect take the initiative to recall those disciples. However, they couldn't let them know that the sect was in trouble. Otherwise, some of the disciples might just run away. "Are there any special days in Pinghui County, or the Thousand Illusionary Sword Sect recently?" Leng Shiqi suddenly had an idea. Wu Yi also guessed Leng Shiqi's intention. He pondered for a moment before saying, "No. In fact, the Thousand Illusionary Sword Sovereign will hold a birthday banquet every 10 years. However, the most recent one was 4 years ago. In addition, the Thousand Illusionary Sword Sect also holds a sect competition every 3 years. Unfortunately, it was held last year. It seems that there are no major events that are worthy of the sect recalling all the disciples recently." "No, they are," Leng Shiqi said with certainty. "You should know that the Thousand Illusionary Sword Sect has joined the 9th Prince, Lei Haoqing, right?" Yes, this point is already known to all. Wu Yi didn't know why Leng Shiqi would suddenly change the topic. Lei Haoge had violated His Majesty's taboo, and was already under house arrest. What did this have to do with the destruction of the Thousand Illusionary Sword Sect? A cold smile appeared on Leng Shiqi's face. Right now, not many people know the truth of what happened in the imperial capital. If we send someone to inform the Thousand Illusion Sword Sect that Lei Haoqing obtained the position of Crown Prince, how do you think they'll react? Without a doubt, his eyes lit up and he said loudly, "They'll definitely celebrate. After all, this is the hope of the Thousand Illusionary Sword Sect." However, the people that the Thousand Illusionary Sword Sect sent to the imperial capital are all dead. Without their message, how could the Thousand Illusionary Sword Sect believe it so easily? "You don't have to worry about that. I have my ways. What you need to do is to spread the news and reach a consensus with the city lords of the imperial capital and every city. You can't afford to make any mistakes," Leng Shiqi instructed. "This humble one understands. What's the second problem?" Wu Yi couldn't help but frown. "That's the Thousand Illusionary Sword Sect's protective formation. This formation is called the Thousand Illusionary 9 Pavilions Sword Formation. It's a killing formation, an illusion formation, and a trap formation. It's very difficult to deal with. Even if we have 2 Heavenly Origin Stage experts, if the Thousand Illusionary Sword Sect and the other experts personally take charge of the formation, we'll probably suffer a lot of casualties." Leng Shiqi also felt that this was a little difficult to deal with. This was the foundation of a top sect. Even if the Thousand Illusionary Sword Sect had declined for decades, as long as the Thousand Illusionary 9 Pavilions Sword Formation existed, it would still be a colossus even if it didn't have a Heavenly Origin Stage expert. Unless it was a matter of sacrificing lives, it wouldn't be easy to break the formation and destroy the Thousand Illusionary Sword Sect. Leng Shiqi stood up as he thought of this. How long will it take for the Eastern Suppression Thunder Flame Army to be in place? About 2 more days. I'll leave these matters to you. Yan Ming and Deng Xinlei will assist you. Leng Shiqi pointed at the two of them. Wu Yi knew that Yan Ming and Deng Xinlei's roles were actually the same as Zhang Hesu's. Now that he had acknowledged Leng Shiqi's strength and methods, he could only be manipulated by him. After Leng Shiqi said, "I will go and take a look myself," he left Pinghui City in a carefree manner. Very quickly, Leng Shiqi directly teleported to the vicinity of the Thousand Illusionary Sword Sect. He hid his figure, and even used the Gu King to help him conceal his aura. He opened his supercilious eyes, and began to slowly walk around the Thousand Illusionary Sword Sect. He wanted to find some flaws and breakthrough points. However, the process didn't go smoothly. This was because the mountain where the Thousand Illusionary Sword Sect was located originally formed a formation. It was on this foundation that the later generations set up the Thousand Illusionary Nine Pavilions Sword Formation. It was almost impossible to find any flaws. Just as Leng Shiqi was a little helpless, he suddenly discovered a familiar spirit aura in his supercilious eyes. He hadn't seen that aura for a long time, but at this moment, Leng Shiqi smiled gently and quickly approached. The owner of that spirit aura was the abandoned disciple of the Thousand Illusionary Sword Sect, Ozu. Chapter 698. Now Ozu had reached the early stage of Gang's spirit realm, and his temperament had changed greatly. He was no longer Yushu, but full of calmness and restraint. At this moment he was standing at the top of a hill, looking at the sect of the Thousand Illusion Sword Sect in the distance. No one knew what he was thinking. Suddenly, a figure fell from the sky. Ozu stabbed out with his sword without turning his head. Suddenly, the dreamlike sword light swept in all directions. At the same time, several illusions were mixed in the sword light, making it impossible to guard against. However, the figure held a green feather fan in his hand. After a while, he raised the wind and swept the world. All the sword light was swept away. Ozu frowned and turned around. His eyes were full of a look as if he was facing a great enemy. However, when he saw the person who came, he put away his posture and said, "How should I call you?" The person who came was Leng Shiqi. He smiled, took back the green feather wind forest fan and said, "My real name is Lu Xingji." Lu Xingji. Ozu murmured. "I seem to have heard of it somewhere." Now the news that Leng Shiqi had become one of the 4 directors had spread to the world. Almost everyone knew his identity, but Ozu hadn't been to the town in recent days, so he didn't know the specific identity of Leng Shiqi. Leng Shiqi looked at Ozu, who had just entered the Gang spirit realm, and there was a faint aura of isolation on his body. He must have never gone out of the small secret realm of the Southern Divine Peak. He didn't come out until he reached the Gang spirit realm. "Brother Ziyu, now that you have broken out of seclusion and appeared near the Thousand Illusion Sword Sect, what are your plans?" Ozu didn't answer but asked, "Why is Brother Lu here? You must not be here to see the scenery." "Of course not." Leng Shiqi sized up Ozu and guessed his purpose for coming here. "Perhaps our purpose is the same." Leng Shiqi remembered that Ozu had been tricked by the Thousand Illusions Sword Sect back then, and had almost been soul-searched into a fool. Later on, he had managed to escape with great difficulty, but his family had all died at the hands of the Thousand Illusions Sword Sect. The Thousand Illusions Sword Sect also accused him of having an affair with a witch and betraying the sect, making him unable to raise his head for the rest of his life. This kind of hatred could be said to be irreconcilable. At that time, Ozu said that he wouldn't come out of seclusion until he reached the spirit realm. But now he reached the Gang spirit realm, and he specially came to the Thousand Illusion Sword Sect. What did he want to do? Leng Shiqi didn't believe that he was here to enjoy the scenery. Therefore, Leng Shiqi reckoned that Ozu was most likely here for revenge. Leng Shiqi's biggest headache right now was the sect-protecting formation of the Thousand Illusions Sword Sect. If he wanted to destroy the Thousand Illusions Sword Sect with the least amount of casualties, he had to find a way to break the sword formation of the Thousand Illusions 9 Pavilions. It was possible to use human lives to force a breakthrough, but what Leng Shiqi wanted was credit. Of course, the fewer people who died, the more credit he would get. Therefore, he did not want to use this method unless he had no other choice. At this moment, Oziyu's unexpected appearance gave Leng Shiqi a chance. Oziyu was the most outstanding disciple of the Thousand Illusion Sword sect. He might know something about the Thousand Illusion 9 Pavilion sword formation. Oziyu looked up and down at Leng Shiqi. He couldn't see through Leng Shiqi anymore. He only knew that if Leng Shiqi wanted to kill him, it wouldn't take much effort. He simply said, "Brother Liu, what do you want to say? Just say it." Brother Ziyu is straightforward. Leng Shiqi clapped his hands and set up a restriction around him. He said, "To tell you the truth, I'm here to take revenge on the Thousand Illusion Sword sect." Revenge? What enmity do you have with the Thousand Illusion Sword sect? Oziyu didn't quite believe his words. Brother Ziyu, have you forgotten that when I left the small secret realm, you specially reminded me to be careful of the people from the Thousand Illusion Sword sect? As you expected, there was indeed a Spirit Gang realm expert from the Thousand Illusion Sword sect hiding on the southern Divine Peak. I almost died at the hands of that person. If it weren't for the help of a benefactor, I'm afraid I would have been buried in the southern Divine Peak. Do you think I have any enmity with the Thousand Illusion Sword sect? Leng Shiqi explained. Oziyu's face also showed some disgust. The people of the Thousand Illusion Sword sect are really so despicable and shameless. If what you said is true, I think we might as well cooperate. Hearing this, Leng Shiqi thought to himself that it was as expected. Oh, Brother Ziyu, do you have the same idea as me? That's great. With your understanding of the Thousand Illusion Sword sect and my forces, we might be able to shake the Thousand Illusion Sword sect if we join forces. You still have forces? How strong are they? Leng Shiqi smiled mysteriously. In short, they're not weak. Now, as long as we can break the sect-protecting formation of the Thousand Illusion Sword sect, I'm confident that I can deal a heavy blow to the Thousand Illusion Sword sect. You're so confident? Oziyu asked suspiciously. He knew the Thousand Illusion Sword sect very well. Even if the Thousand Illusion Sword sect had begun to decline, there were still many experts in the Unity of Heaven realm, and dozens of Spirit Gang realm experts in the sect. Even without the Thousand Illusion 9 Pavilion sword formation, unless another top sect came to attack, it would be wishful thinking to deal a heavy blow to the Thousand Illusion Sword sect. Leng Shiqi saw Oziyu's suspicion. Brother Ziyu, you've been in seclusion all year round, so you're very isolated from the outside world. Do you know that the Thousand Illusion Sword sect has long been involved in the fight for the throne? The Thousand Illusion Sword sect wants to take a gamble. If the prince they support wins the throne, then the Thousand Illusion Sword sect may even become the state religion of the Thunderfire dynasty. The danger of decline will naturally be easily solved. Unfortunately, the ninth prince they support has already been defeated, and the Thousand Illusion Sword sect has attracted the hostility of the Thunderfire dynasty. Now the Dark Thunder Guards and the Discipline Commission in Pinghui Prefecture are preparing to attack the Thousand Illusion Sword sect. A portion of the Thousand Illusion Sword sect's experts have already died in the imperial capital. In addition, the Thousand Illusion Sword Venerable's chi and blood have already declined. How much strength does he have left? Therefore, the Thousand Illusion Sword sect is facing a huge crisis. If it's not handled well, a large amount of territory will be taken away by the Discipline Commission and the Dark Thunder Guards. In the future, when the Thousand Illusion Sword Venerable reaches the end of his life, the Thousand Illusion Sword sect will be in danger of being exterminated. And I am the supervisor of the Dark Thunder Guards. This time, I'm here to put pressure on the Thousand Illusion Sword sect. As long as Brother Ziyu helps me, the Thousand Illusion Sword sect's vitality will definitely be greatly damaged. This is what you and I both want to see. Leng Shiqi's words were 70% true and 30% false. This kind of lie was the most difficult to distinguish. After hearing this, Oziyu fell into deep thought. After a while he said, "All of this is just your side of the story. How can I believe you?" Leng Shiqi shook his head and said, "You can choose not to believe me, but I have no need to lie to you. Moreover, what I said is a secret. Outsiders have no way of knowing, and I can't prove it to you. In fact, is it really that important whether you believe me or not? Our goal is the same, and that's enough." Oziyu hesitated for a moment, then nodded and said, "You're right. Speak. What do you want me to do? Chapter 699. The next morning, a travel-worn disciple of the Thousand Illusions Sword sect rushed to the mountain gate. Several disciples guarding the mountain immediately stopped him. One of them asked, "Senior brother Jiguang, didn't you go to the capital? Why are you back?" Jiguang hugged the person's shoulder and said excitedly, "Good news, good news. The 9th prince has obtained the position of crown prince, and will soon ascend the throne. At that time, our Thousand Illusions Sword sect will be conferred as the state religion." What? Is this true? A few of the disciples nearby also gathered around, and a burst of joy appeared on their faces. The sect had long since submitted to the 9th prince, Lei Haoqing. This was something everyone knew, so the disciples all hoped that the sect would make the right bet. This way, not only would the Thousand Illusions Sword sect obtain a huge amount of resources, after becoming the state religion, they would be able to ignore the Dark Thunder Guards and the Discipline Commission and wantonly steal talented disciples. Then, the Thousand Illusions Sword sect's predicament of lacking manpower would naturally no longer exist. Now that they heard Jiguang's words, they were unable to contain their joy. Although they were still asking if it was true, they already believed it in their hearts. "Of course it's true," Jiguang said firmly. "Quickly take me to see the sect master. I want to report this good news to him." "Okay, but senior brother Jiguang, as long as you enter the sect, you still have to be checked. Please forgive me. This is the sect's rule. Take it," Jiguang said as he handed over a white jade stone. This was the unique identity token of the Thousand Illusions Sword sect disciples. The disciple guarding the mountain took out a palm-sized disc and placed the jade stone inside. Immediately, Jiguang's name appeared on the disc. "Senior brother Jiguang, please take the token. We will go see the sect master now. Let's go, let's go." The two immediately walked through the mountain gate and quickly walked towards the peak of the sect. This Jiguang also secretly let out a sigh of relief. He was also secretly glad that he had met Oziu. Otherwise, no matter how exquisite his disguise was, he would have been discovered as a fake at the mountain gate. That's right, in reality, this Jiguang was the Lung Shiqi after changing his appearance and cultivation. At first, he thought of a way to get the Thousand Illusions Sword sect to call back all their disciples, which was to pretend to be disciples of the Thousand Illusions Sword sect, and give them false information. However, after communicating with Oziu, he found out that all the disciples of the Thousand Illusions Sword sect had to be inspected before entering the mountain gate. Even the elders had to be inspected. Lung Shiqi immediately contacted the headquarters of the Dark Thunder Guards and sent over the identity token of the Thousand Illusions Sword sect's accompanying disciple, which led to this scene. In order not to be discovered by the experts of the Thousand Illusions Sword sect, he had specially learned the first few levels of the Thousand Illusions Sword technique from Oziu. At this moment, he was circulating this technique in his body. Unless it was someone very familiar with him, no one would be able to tell that he was not Jiguang at all. Soon Lung Shiqi met the current sect leader of the Thousand Illusions Sword sect, Wei Qiyan. Wei Qiyan was a great master at the peak of the oneness of heaven and man realm. It was said that he was only 60 or 70 years old this year, which was considered very young for someone in the oneness of heaven and man realm. However, when Lung Shiqi saw him, most of Wei Qian's hair had already turned white, and even his face had many wrinkles. To be able to make a dignified unity of heaven cultivator like this, it could be seen that Wei Qiyan was really mentally and physically exhausted for the Thousand Illusions Sword sect. As soon as Lung Shiqi walked in, he happily recounted the matter. At first, Wei Qiyan was not as happy as the disciples guarding the mountain. Instead, he did not dare to believe it. "Is what you said true? What evidence do you have? Why didn't Yin Mu send the message through the sound transmission formation, and instead let you come all the way here to report?" Wei Qiyan asked 3 important questions in a row. Lung Shiqi was naturally prepared. He replied, "Sect leader, Elder Yin displayed his might in Void Scar Sky and snatched the heavenly Thunderfire Pearl that symbolizes the position of the Crown Prince. He seized the position of the Eastern Palace for the 9th Prince. However, because of this he was seriously injured and is still unconscious. Everyone in the imperial capital knows about this. However, the ninth prince has not been officially conferred the position of Eastern Palace, so the news has not spread. If sect leader does not believe me, you can ask around for news from the imperial capital. It is absolutely true. I believe this news will spread throughout the Thunderfire dynasty in a few days. Speaking of this, Wei Qiyan showed a bit of joy, and also a bit of relief. Good, you have all done well. Wei Qiyan praised. I will immediately report this matter to the Grand Elder. You can go and rest first. You will definitely be rewarded. Lung Shiqi's face lit up with joy. Many thanks, sect leader. This disciple will take his leave first. He walked out of the hall and thought to himself, the first step has finally been successful. Lung Shiqi was not worried that Wei Qiyan would not rush all the disciples back. It had to be known that the more powerful a sect was, the more they cared about their reputation. The Thousand Illusionary Sword sect had been weak for decades, and their days were getting worse and worse. The first-rate sects in Pinghui Prefecture were no longer as respectful to them as before. Therefore, the Thousand Illusionary Sword sect finally had a chance to turn things around. They would definitely not give up this opportunity to increase their reputation. Lung Shiqi was sure that the Thousand Illusionary Sword sect would definitely rush all the disciples to celebrate. They would also tell all the sects in Pinghui Prefecture about this matter, and show off. Right now, the most important thing for Lung Shiqi was another matter. And that was the Thousand Illusionary 9 Pavilions sword formation. After leaving Wei Qian's hall, Lung Shiqi found Ji Guang's residence by beating around the bush. Then he disguised himself and secretly snuck out. Soon, he arrived at an inconspicuous hill in the Thousand Illusionary Sword sect. He looked at the bottomless pool in front of him and muttered, "Is this the place?" Then he opened his hand and a person suddenly appeared beside him. It was Oziu. Oziu didn't come from anywhere else, nor did he hide. He came from Lung Shiqi's underworld. After Oziu agreed to join forces with Lung Shiqi invited him to join the underworld. This Oziu was originally a 1 in a million genius. Later on, he even obtained the inheritance of the Divine Dream Palace. In the future, he would definitely become an expert who could intimidate a region. He was definitely qualified to join the underworld. Moreover, Lung Shiqi had some friendship with him back then. Now that they were on the same side, Lung Shiqi decided to invite him to join the underworld. And the inheritance and title that Oziu obtained from the underworld was the 10 halls Yama Luan Huan Wang. It was worth mentioning that after Lung Shiqi killed Zhang Hesu in Pinghui City, he also met the conditions for the underworld to level up. However, he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to escape when the underworld leveled up. Seeing that a great battle was about to happen, he planned to level up the underworld after destroying the Thousand Illusionary Sword sect just in case. Oziu walked to the edge of the deep pool, and gently stirred it a few times. He said, "That's right. This is one of the 9 array cores of the Thousand Illusionary 9 Pavilions sword formation." Chapter 700. The mountain range where the Thousand Illusionary Sword sect is located has a natural trapping array. They used the 9 array cores of this natural array as the foundation to set up the Thousand Illusionary 9 Pavilions sword array. This deep pool is one of the array cores. I only found this place by chance. Oziu explained. Lung Shiqi was also somewhat puzzled. Since this is the array core, it's extremely important to the Thousand Illusionary Sword sect. Why is there no one guarding it? It's all because the people of the Thousand Illusionary Sword sect think they're smart. They think that the more unguarded it is, the less people will think that this is the array core. Moreover, this array core is naturally formed. Although it's in the deep pool, no one knows its exact location. So that's how it is. Then how can Brother Ziyu determine the location of the array core? Oziu gave Lung Shiqi a meaningful look and said, "I couldn't before but I can now." Immediately after, Oziu sat on the ground, his entire body emitting a mysterious aura. His fingers flew up, and after a dozen breaths of time he suddenly said, "Found it." Lung Shiqi could see that Oziu seemed to have obtained an extraordinary ability from the inheritance of the king of Luanzhuan. Thanks to Brother Lu, the inheritance I obtained is related to the art of divination. Everything in the world, including the 5 elements and yin and yang, can be traced. I've already found the location of the array core, Oziyu said with a smile. His eyes were filled with gratitude towards Leng Shiqi. The art of divination. Leng Shiqi was also quite surprised. He had heard of the art of divination before. Those divination masters could lock onto the location of people, things with just a few clues. They could even predict the future. However, there were very few divination masters. They were even rarer than alchemy grandmasters. In any case, Leng Shiqi had never met one before. Now, Oziyu had obtained this ability from the inheritance of the king of Luanzhuan. Moreover, he could easily deduce the exact location of the array core. This alone was shocking enough. He said, Brother Ziyu, having this ability is great news for the underworld. It will be much easier to deal with the 1,000 illusionary sword sect this time. Exactly. It isn't just this formation core. I'm able to deduce the location of the other 8 formation cores as well. So long as we tamper with the formation cores, then the illusory 9 pavilion sword formation might not even be able to activate normally. Leave this matter to me. I can secretly destroy these array cores without anyone noticing. Oziyu's words were filled with hatred. Hatred for the 1,000 illusions sword sect. Leng Shiqi nodded. Oziyu had the ability to deduce. As long as he did not take the initiative to show himself, no one would be able to discover him. I heard that Lord Lu has a way to gather the disciples of the 1,000 illusion sword sect, and plans to break the 1,000 illusion 9 pavilion sword formation. How are the preparations? Wu Yi knew that Leng Shiqi's temper wasn't very good. Now that Lin Yuanliang was so aggressive, he was afraid that the two would have a conflict. He immediately tried to smooth things over. General Lin, I just received news that the 1,000 illusion sword sect has begun to gather all the external disciples. It's said that it's a celebration for the 9th prince to become the crown prince. Lei Haoqing? Crown prince? Lin Yuanliang raised his eyebrows. This is different from what I know. Before he finished his sentence, he suddenly paused and clapped his hands. So that's how it is. Lord Lu only used 1 day to make the 1,000 illusion sword sect receive false information and believe it to be true. Just based on this, regardless of what others say, I acknowledge you as one of the 4 great chiefs. Leng Shiqi continued. Not only that, I also found the 1,000 illusion 9 pavilions sword formation's core and secretly tampered with it. This formation is no longer a threat. Hearing this, Wu Yi and Lin Yuanliang were both shocked and felt that it was too unreal. In just 1 day, he had given the 1,000 illusionary sword sect false information, found the array core of the sect protecting formation, and even tampered with it. Was there really someone who could do this? Leng Shiqi really thought that the 1,000 illusion sword sect was his own backyard, and that he could come and go as he pleased without anyone noticing. What was even stranger was that they had never heard of Leng Shiqi knowing how to use formations. To be able to easily find the sect protecting formation's core, and even tamper with it, one had to be a great formation master. After just a few words, Lin Yuanliang felt that Leng Shiqi seemed to be hiding many secrets. Wu Yi was even more unable to see through Leng Shiqi. He secretly thought that he was indeed extraordinary to be able to become one of the 4 great chiefs at such a young age. Chapter 701. After that, Leng Shiqi, Lin Yuanliang, and Wu Yi discussed the details of the plan. In 2 days, they would attack the 1,000 illusion sword sect. The Dark Thunder Guards and Discipline Commission of the Pinghui Prefecture began to move. All the experts split up and arrived near the 1,000 illusion sword sect. The 10,000 soldiers of the Eastern Suppression Thunder Flame Army were also ready. Every soldier here was at least at the Spirit Transformation realm. They could be called the best army of the Thunder Flame dynasty. 2 days later, it was time for the 1,000 illusion sword sect to hold their celebration. Originally, they wanted to invite the nearby sects to participate, but it was too rushed, so they gave up. As long as they spread the news, those sects would come to flatter them in the future. On this day, the 1,000 illusion sword sect's sect master, Wei Qian, and several elders at the Unity of Heaven realm were sitting in a large square. In front of them were tens of thousands of disciples. Even though the Thousand Illusion Sword sect had declined, it was still a top sect. There were still many people who wanted to join the Thousand Illusion Sword sect. In the past, they were most worried about the talented disciples. Sect Master Wei Qiyan stood up. His face was flushed red. He had also inquired about the news from the imperial capital. The response he received was just as Leng Shiqi had said. Wei Qiyan was sure of it, so he decided to hold the celebration. The only thing that made him feel suspicious was that Ji Guang had secretly left the mountain. But this time, Wei Qiyan didn't care too much. It was as if he could already see the Thousand Illusion Sword sect rising again, and standing among the strong. His mentality had changed due to the great joy. At this moment he began to talk at length. Many of the disciples were very excited. However, just when they were at their most excited and happy, a voice came from the distance. The Thousand Illusion Sword sect is holding a celebration without inviting guests. How low-key. I came uninvited, please forgive me. Yu Qiyan frowned and turned around with all the disciples, only to see a few disciples who were guarding the mountain running up in a panic. They shouted as they ran, "Head, the Dark Thunder Guards and the people from the Discipline Commission are here. Many masters are blocking the mountain gate." Why are the Dark Thunder Guards and Discipline Commission here at this time? Wei Qiyan was filled with doubt. Usually they didn't interfere with each other's business. Now that the Thousand Illusionary Sword sect had made a great contribution, could it be that they were here to congratulate them? After all, the status of the Thousand Illusion Sword sect would no longer be the same as before. It would definitely be higher than the Discipline Commission and the Dark Thunder Guards, so it was reasonable for them to come and congratulate him. However, Wei Qiyan heard that the voice was full of sarcasm and ridicule. It seemed that the visitor was not friendly. "Let's go and take a look," he ordered, and all the cultivators walked toward the mountain gate. When they saw Leng Shiqi standing at the front in his black and red official robe, and behind him were thousands of Dark Thunder Guards and masters of the Discipline Commission, each with a stern look, Wei Qiyan had a bad feeling. He didn't recognize Leng Shiqi, but he recognized the official uniform he was wearing. It was clearly the uniform of the Dark Thunder Guard's 4th Chief Steward. When Wei Qiyan contacted the imperial capital, he also knew that the Dark Thunder Guard had a Gang Spirit Realm 4th Chief Steward. At first, he secretly mocked him, but now he saw him. Wei Qiyan didn't think that the 4th Chief Steward came to the Thousand Illusionary Sword sect in person to congratulate him. He symbolically cupped his hands. In terms of status, he didn't think that he was inferior to the 4th Chief Steward. "You must be Lord Lu. Congratulations on your high position at such a young age. I wonder what brings you to our Thousand Illusionary Sword sect." Leng Shiqi said 2 words, "Gifts?" "What gifts?" Swish. Leng Shiqi took out an imperial edict and said, "By His Majesty's order, the Thousand Illusionary Sword sect colluded with the 9th Prince to disturb the imperial court and meddle in the battle for the Crown Prince." "Nonsense!" Wei Qiyan immediately shouted. "Our Thousand Illusionary Sword sect clearly helped the 9th Prince to become the Crown Prince. How can we be guilty? Lord Lu, don't talk nonsense. You should know that trouble comes from careless talk." Leng Shiqi sneered. "Wei Qiyan, do you think I'm here to play with you? Cut the crap. Today is the day your Thousand Illusionary Sword sect will be destroyed." "Ha, ridiculous." Wei Qiyan laughed disdainfully. "You want to destroy our Thousand Illusionary Sword sect? It's too ridiculous. Lord Lu, you're so young. Why is your brain not working well?" "General Lin, it's time for you to show up," Leng Shiqi said to the air in the distance. Immediately, dense figures swarmed out from all directions. Those people were neat in uniform and surrounded the Thousand Illusionary Sword sect at an extremely fast speed. Wei Qian's expression changed. He recognized that those people were the East Guarding Thunder Flame army of the Thunder Flame dynasty. There were more than 10,000 people as far as the eye could see. When did so many people hide near the Thousand Illusionary Sword sect? At this moment, he withdrew his disdain and arrogance. If these tens of thousands of East Guarding Thunder Flame army were added, the Thousand Illusionary Sword sect would really face a bitter battle. However, what truly frightened him was that, at some unknown time, there was a person standing high in the sky, looking down at them from above. That gaze was like looking at a group of dead people. This person was Lin Yuanliang. Due to his great reputation in the coastal provinces, he was quickly recognized by many disciples of the Thousand Illusionary Sword sect. Wei Qian was even more shocked. You're Lin Yuanliang. At this moment, his heart sank to the bottom of the valley. If he was worried about a bitter battle, he finally realized that the Thousand Illusionary Sword sect might really be destroyed today. Others might still think that they were lucky. After all, the Thousand Illusionary Sword sect also had the heavenly origin stage Thousand Illusionary Sword Sovereign. However, as the sect leader, Wei Qian knew better than anyone that their supreme elder was already in a weakened state. How could he be a match for Lin Yuanliang? Leng Shiqi said, Wei Qian, do you still think that my words are laughable? General Lin, a long delay may lead to trouble. Give the order. Lin Yuanliang did not answer. He pointed one finger at the sky and the wind and clouds changed. Then he clawed down. As if tearing the sky and earth apart, 5 hair-thin black lines appeared in the void. Wei Qian was shocked. If he touched it, he would die instantly. However, suddenly, a bright sword light shot up into the sky from the back mountain of the Thousand Illusionary Sword sect. In the blink of an eye, it turned into a shocking sword radiance and cut off the 5 black lines. An extremely old figure appeared across the sky. He was the supreme elder of the Thousand Illusionary Sword sect, the Thousand Illusionary Sword Sovereign. Lin Yuanliang said coldly, Let me see how much power the supreme elder of the Thousand Illusionary Sword Sovereign has left. Leng Shiqi looked at Wei Qian and the disciples of the Thousand Illusionary Sword sect. His killing intent rose and he waved his hand, kill. Chapter 702. More than 10,000 masters rushed up at once, especially the East Town Thunder Flame Army, the Dark Thunder Guards, and the masters in the oneness of Heaven and Men realm, and the Gang Spirit realm of the Discipline Department. They took the lead and rushed over like a sharp knife. All the disciples of the Thousand Illusionary Sword sect immediately panicked. Just a moment ago, it was still a celebratory atmosphere, but now it was a disaster. Although they were disciples of top sects and had their own pride, they still found it difficult to remain calm in the face of life and death. Yu Qian's face darkened. He knew that he could not panic at this time. He also knew that it was difficult to calm people with a few words, so he did not dare to hesitate and immediately shouted, Open the sword formation of Thousand Illusions 9 pavilions. At present, they were far inferior to the Leng Shiqi in both numbers and combat power, so they could only rely on the sect-protecting formation. Moreover, Yu Qian was very confident in the sword formation of Thousand Illusions 9 pavilions. Even if Lin Yuanliang was here, as long as the Thousand Illusion Sword Master was in the formation, he might be able to defeat Lin Yuanliang. He took out a formation plate and poured his spirit force into it. 9 places in the Thousand Illusionary Sword sect lit up with a dazzling light. There was even a trace of a dreamy feeling. Just looking at it would make one feel intoxicated. Seeing this, Yu Qian's face finally became a little better. If the formation was opened, they would have the ability to fight. Many disciples of the Thousand Illusion Sword sect were indeed much calmer. The sect-protecting formation has been opened. Is this the sword formation of Thousand Illusions 9 pavilions? It's really powerful. With the protection of the formation, we may be able to fight. However, the next moment, Yu Qian's expression suddenly froze. Because when the spiritual light of the sword formation of Thousand Illusions 9 pavilions was about to converge into the real formation, it strangely dissipated. Many disciples of the Thousand Illusion Sword sect were also confused. They had never seen the formation open. Could it be that the sword formation of Thousand Illusions 9 pavilions was like this? Yu Qian's eyes widened, and he almost choked to death. Including him, the senior members of the Thousand Illusion Sword sect knew that the sword formation of Thousand Illusions 9 pavilions had collapsed by itself. One of the formation masters panicked and said, Leader, the formation eye of the sect-protecting formation has been destroyed. We have a mole here. What did you say? Yu Qian was so angry that he almost lost control. He instantly turned around and looked at Leng Shiqi. The look in his eyes was as if he wanted to swallow Leng Shiqi alive. It's you. Although Wei Qi couldn't find out who the traitor was, he was sure that it was Leng Shiqi. Leng Shiqi sneered. In fact, he could have launched a sneak attack directly. There was no need to talk nonsense with Yu Qiyan from the beginning. The reason why he did this was because he wanted to attack the Thousand Illusions sword sect openly. He wanted to intimidate them with his strength and force Wei Qi to activate the sect protecting formation. The sect protection formation could be considered their strongest protection, and it was also equivalent to a life-saving straw. It could be said that everyone had placed their hopes on the Thousand Illusions 9 Pavilions sword formation. When this hope was shattered, the disciples of the Thousand Illusions sword sect would be at their weakest. When there was hope and then there was despair, after a huge fluctuation in the state of mind, it would also greatly affect their combat effectiveness. Now, tens of thousands of soldiers and secret Thunder Guards had killed their way into the Thousand Illusions sword sect. These disciples, who were usually elites of the top sects, were killed without any power to fight back and were utterly defeated. As the saying goes, a defeated army is like a landslide. In this fight, the Thousand Illusions sword sect was already on the verge of defeat. In addition, in terms of high-end combat effectiveness, Leng Shiqi's side was 3 times that of the Thousand Illusions sword sect. Moreover, they were all experts carefully cultivated by the Thunderstorm dynasty. Their combat effectiveness was no weaker than that of the disciples of the Thousand Illusions sword sect. In just a few fights, several disciples of the Gang Spirit realm of the Thousand Illusions sword sect had died. Wei Qiyan's mind was blank. He had worked hard all his life to save the Thousand Illusions sword sect, but he had never thought that the Thousand Illusions sword sect would face a situation of collapse. What was even more unexpected was that a top sect would be defeated so quickly. Not only was it defeated, but if it went on like this, it would not be long before the Thousand Illusions sword sect completely disappeared from the world. The sect that Wei Qiyan had worked hard all his life to manage was about to disappear. He could no longer control himself. With red eyes, he rushed directly to the Leng Shiqi like a fierce beast. Wu Yi, Yan Ming and Deng Xinlei, who were beside Leng Shiqi, moved at the same time and stopped in front of him. Wei Qiyan held a 7th-level spiritual sword in his hand, and set up a misty sword net with a turn of his hand. Suddenly, the spiritual power of heaven and earth became violent, and Wu Yi and the other 2 were momentarily absent-minded. In this short moment, Wei Qiyan's sword net suddenly broke out, leaving horrible sword marks on the bodies of Wu Yi and the other 2 in an instant. The 3 of them were also at the middle stage of the oneness of heaven and men realm, but they were vulnerable in front of the furious Wei Qiyan. It was not their fault that they were too weak. In fact, since they could become inspectors or supervisors of the secret Thunder Guards, their combat effectiveness was absolutely among the top of the same level. It could only be said that Wei Qiyan was too strong. He was a great master at the peak of the oneness of heaven and men realm, and had been trying to break through to the Tianyuan realm. Not to mention that he was the leader of a top sect, and could use all the resources at will. There was no doubt that his strength was strong. However, Wu Yi and the others had also bought some time for Leng Shiqi. Boom! Leng Shiqi activated the wild demon blood beast body, and Vajra indestructible divine art. Coupled with the Gu King's possession, his body was filled with all kinds of strange auras that were unpredictable. He held the 10 directions fluttering snow spear in his right hand, and bursts of crimson ice crystals spread out, instantly forming a crimson hell. He held the blood-stained star demonic saber tightly in his left and right hand, and a saber light that could tear heaven and earth slashed out, slashing the physical body and the primordial spirit. Divine night blooming epiphyllum. Leng Shiqi stretched out his arms behind his back, and black and white streams of light intertwined and spiraled. A yin and yang dragon soared in the sky, and the surrounding spiritual power of heaven and earth became chaotic. Flying dragon great void. Just after Wu Yi and the other 2 were repelled, Wei Qiyan saw the powerful eruption of Leng Shiqi. He couldn't help but be surprised. Leng Shiqi gave him a feeling that he was more powerful than Wu Yi and the other 2 masters at the oneness of heaven and men realm. He was only at the Gang Spirit realm, but he had such a strong fighting capacity. His potential could only be described as terrifying. However, this level of attack was still a little weak in the eyes of Wei Qiyan. He stood with his sword horizontally and flicked the sword with one finger. In an instant, a sword sound surged out, tearing the crimson hell apart, and even twisting the yin and yang dragon. Wei Qiyan stabbed again. The glaze-like sword light flashed and cut off the short-lived saber light, as easily as crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. The momentum of the sword light didn't diminish, and it cut the yin and yang dragon in the sky into two pieces. Leng Shiqi was shocked. It turned out that the peak of the oneness of heaven and men realm in his heyday was so powerful. When he killed Li Jueqing before, he only saw Hua Liyue seriously injure Li Jueqing with one move. Now he thought that Hua Liyue's strength was also abnormally strong. However, this made Leng Shiqi more eager to fight. Anyway, he had two masters at the Tianyuan realm here, and there were several masters at the oneness of heaven and men realm from the discipline commission around him. His own safety was guaranteed. Even if there was an accident, he could hide in the mansion of the dead. Since there was no worry, Leng Shiqi also wanted to test his limit on Wei Qiyan. Chapter 703. Wei Qiyan easily broke Leng Shiqi's attack, and the killing intent in his heart grew stronger. Even if he couldn't escape the calamity of extermination today, he would drag Leng Shiqi down with him. At this moment, an invisible blade suddenly hit Wei Qiyan. It was the short-lived primordial spirit saber light. Wei Qiyan immediately showed some pain. He was also very surprised that there was an invisible saber light that strangely tore at his spiritual power. However, as the sect leader of the 1,000 Illusionary Sword sect, he also cultivated illusions. His spiritual power had long condensed into a primordial spirit, and he quickly annihilated the invisible saber light. And Leng Shiqi was not alone. After Wu Yi was forced to retreat, he seized this good opportunity. He slapped out a palm print from afar, but there were eerie ghosts in the palm print, howling incessantly. Yan Ming held a heavy long staff and smashed it down. A staff shadow that was hundreds of feet long blasted toward Wei Qiyan with great force. Deng Xinlei had the strength to pull up a mountain. His entire body was stirred up with vigorous aura energy. He punched out as if he could shatter mountains and rivers. They knew very well that they were no match for Wei Qiyan, but as long as they could delay him, the sect leader, it was the best thing for them. Wei Qiyan was very impatient. With a flip of his left hand, he took out a 7th-level spirit sword. Two swords came out at the same time. One sword was like dreamy glass that intoxicated people, while the other was like a white steed flashing through a crack, as fast as lightning. These were the two sword moves in the 1,000 Illusionary Sword technique, created by the founder of the 1,000 Illusionary Sword sect. One was inclined towards illusions, and the other was inclined towards speed. The founder combined the two sword moves into one. For a time, he was invincible, and had never created such a huge foundation as the 1,000 Illusionary Sword sect. Unfortunately, none of his descendants could completely combine the two sword moves. At most, they could only use the two sword moves separately like Wei Qiyan. Although the power was definitely not as good as the complete move, it was still powerful enough. The two completely different sword moves instantly broke the attack of Wu Yi and the other two. They didn't stop Wei Qiyan for long at all. When Wu Yi and the others stopped Wei Qiyan, Leng Shiqi's forearms formed seals at the same time. What was shocking was that he was actually forming 4 completely different seals at the same time. Leng Shiqi's body flashed with red, green, blue, and yellow spirit energy. Among them, the red spirit energy soared into the sky. The cry of a phoenix broke through the 9 heavens, and a vivid shadow of a fire bird soared into the sky. Bursts of flames caused the surrounding temperature to rise sharply. 16 heavens transformations, immortal bird. Green spiritual energy spread out, and the wind within a radius of a few miles became violent. Countless wind blades cut through the air, and it was like a wind prison. 16 heavens transformations, calling the wind. In the blink of an eye, the blue spiritual power raised monstrous waves, and a huge water dragon overturned the river and the sea, as if it wanted to swallow everything. 16 heaven transformations, true insight. Water dragon soul. The yellow spiritual energy transformed into a towering mountain peak that covered the sky and the sun. It carried with it the power to shake the earth and kill in all directions. 16 Heavens Transformations. Mountain Suppression. Lung Shiqi was actually using 4 7th-level spiritual skills at the same time. Such a huge movement immediately attracted everyone's attention. Whether it was the people of the Thousand Illusion Sword sect, the Dark Thunder Guards, the Discipline Commission, or the Eastern Thunder Flame Army, they all looked at Lung Shiqi in shock. First of all, 7th-level spiritual power was not a cabbage on the roadside. Even among the people present, only those great masters in the oneness of heaven and men realm had 7th-level spiritual skills. But even in the oneness of heaven and men realm, none of them dared to say that they could use 4 7th-level spiritual skills at the same time. If the new chief of the Dark Thunder Guards had so many powerful spiritual skills when he was in the gang spirit realm, it would be reasonable. After all, it was still possible to obtain 7th-level spiritual skills in a high position. But this strength made all the masters blush with shame. Wei Qiyan was shocked by Lung Shiqi again. He also found that the opponent in front of him could always surprise him again and again. It had been like this since Lung Shiqi came to the Thousand Illusion Sword sect. The next moment, something that even surprised Lung Shiqi himself happened. Because the 4 spiritual skills he used were actually a little out of his control. He had forcefully used the 4 great spiritual techniques in order to see how far he could go. However, he had already used them, so how could he lose control? In the air, the firebird flew and the water dragon roared. Strangely, the wind prison suddenly shrank and condensed into a pure white wind spirit tiger. As for the mountain in the sky, it disintegrated and reformed into an incomparably huge Xian tortoise. The firebird, the water dragon, the wind tiger, and the tortoise respectively emitted a radiance that made people not dare to look directly at them. They gathered together and a 4 spirits formation appeared between the sky and the earth. Suddenly the sky and the earth shook. Wisps of primitive gray flowing light outlined the edge of the formation. Waves of origin power were emitted, and all the spiritual and original energy of heaven and earth within a radius of dozens of miles became chaotic. It affected the Thousand Illusion Swordmaster, Lin Yuanliang, and the old man who were in the unity of heaven and man stage. The 3 of them subconsciously stopped. Although they were opponents, they had the same feeling at this moment. That was disbelief. Those who were in the celestial realm could not sense it, but the 2 of them clearly felt that Lung Shiqi had mobilized a power that even they could not comprehend. The power of the laws of heaven and earth. The 4 spirits formation rotated and enveloped Wei Qiyan. He suddenly felt a tearing force everywhere, as if it was going to tear him apart. The power of the 4 elements of earth, water, wind, and fire surrounded him, making it difficult for him to even breathe. Wei Qiyan made a prompt decision to burn his blood essence and spit out a blood sword. As soon as the blood sword appeared, there was a pulling force that merged his 2 7th-level spiritual swords into it. The misty sword radiance flowed gently. He turned into a flowing light and instantly slashed out countless sword shadows. Wei Qiyan actually had some of the true essence of the Thousand Illusion Sword Codex. Unfortunately, in front of the power of the laws of heaven and earth, it was still too weak. Under the strangulation of the 4 spirits formation, Wei Qiyan was completely sealed. No matter how hard he tried to resist, he could not reverse the situation. In the end, the 4 spirits formation exploded, and more than half of the entire Thousand Illusion Sword sect collapsed. Everyone was in a panic, and no one knew how many unlucky people from the Thousand Illusory Sword sect were killed by the 4 spirits formation. Puff! Lung Shiqi suddenly spat out a large amount of blood, and traces of blood appeared on his 7 orifices. However, his eyes were unusually bright, and there was a hint of surprise. However, his expression immediately became serious again, because he did not absorb Wei Qiyan's soul. That meant Wei Qiyan was not dead. Rolling his eyes, Lung Shiqi found that Wei Qiyan's body had fallen straight to the ground. His vitality was like a candle in the wind that could disappear at any time. But there was a faint sword shadow protecting his last trace of life. That should be his life-saving trump card, Lung Shiqi guessed. Wei Qiyan was the head of the Thousand Illusion Sword sect, so it was normal for him to have some life-saving trump cards. As long as he forced out this trump card, others could easily kill Wei Qiyan without having to do it himself. Chapter 704. High up in the sky, Lin Yuanliang's body glowed with spiritual light. His blood rose, and the origin energy of the heavens and earth surged. A golden armored shadow of the mad god walked out from behind him. He punched out and the shadow of the mad god trembled strangely. The surrounding void space was distorted and the frightening fist's strength was directed towards the Thousand Illusion Swordmaster. The Thousand Illusion Swordmaster immediately took out the inherited sword of the Thousand Illusions Sword Sect, the Thousand Illusions Sword. In terms of grade, this sword was a level 8 earth weapon. A level 8 spiritual weapon was called an earth weapon. Unlike a level 7 treasure weapon, which only had a certain level of spirituality, a level 8 earth weapon had already formed a weapon spirit. The weapon spirit was connected to the sword wielder, and could be more compatible with the heavens and earth. It could greatly enhance the unity of heaven and man and divine origin stage cultivators. However, the rarity of a level 8 earth weapon was comparable to that of a divine origin stage cultivator. From a certain perspective, there were even fewer level 8 earth weapons than divine origin stage cultivators. The Thousand Illusion Swordmaster's sword could split mountains and rivers. The magnificent sword shadow was about to split the sky into two, and also shattered Lin Yuanliang's fist's strength. However, the Thousand Illusion Swordmaster's heart trembled. He did not know why, but he suddenly felt a strong sense of danger. He was in the divine origin stage and had been through many battles. He naturally had a sense of danger. At this moment, a thunderous roar could be heard from the 9 heavens. Dark clouds gathered and thunder rumbled. The origin energy of the heavens and earth trembled. The heavenly thunder of divine punishment vanquished demons and slay Buddhas. A sloppy figure bathed in the heavenly thunder of divine lightning appeared. He looked like a thunder god descending. He was the Imperial Hall of Consecration Master who had been hiding for a long time, the old man. Those from the Thousand Illusions Sword Sect who did not know what was going on were shocked. There was another divine origin stage cultivator, the Thousand Illusions Swordmaster, and Wei Qian revealed a look of despair. Temporarily blocking Lin Yuanliang was already the Thousand Illusions Swordmaster's limit. How could he block another divine origin stage cultivator? As the heavenly thunder descended, the Thousand Illusions Swordmaster's white hair swayed without wind. He condensed his sword fingers, and an illusion formation was formed. The illusion formation ignored the thunderbolts and enveloped the old man. The old man tilted his head and said, "Old thing, your illusion technique is not bad, but I'm also a spirit caster. This little bit of illusion technique can't do anything to me." Then he snapped his fingers lightly, and a layer of light purple lightning sprinkled down, protecting himself. At the same time, the destructive holy thunder struck. The Thousand Illusions Swordmaster's magic treasure sword shook and 3 sword projections appeared in the sky. As the sword shadows trembled, they ignored the sword chi and blocked most of the divine thunder. But at this moment, Lin Yuanliang also made his move. He blasted out another punch. What was different was that this punch actually carried the aura of a powerful army, and it transformed into numerous brave and ferocious knights that charged forward. Pung pung pung. Under the combination of the holy thunder and the fist, the 3 sword shadows were in imminent danger. The Thousand Illusions Swordmaster's face also turned red. He had also reached his limit. On the other side, Wei Qian, who was already on the verge of death, suddenly opened his mouth and said something. But no one else heard his voice. Only the Thousand Illusions Swordmaster lowered his head and looked at him. His eyes were filled with reluctance and hope. Seeing that his 3 sword shadows were about to collapse, the Thousand Illusions Swordmaster seemed to have made a very difficult decision. Then he slapped his forehead and a mini person flew out from the top of his head. That was his immortal soul. The immortal soul of the Thousand Illusions Swordmaster swayed slightly, and actually entered Wei Qian's body. Wei Qian's body started to float mysteriously, and the blood-red sword shadow that enveloped his body also shrunk back into his body. Waves of frightening aura spread out, and even Lin Yuanliang and the old man's faces were filled with seriousness. Lung Shiqi's supercilious eyes also flashed with a strange look. Through his supercilious eyes, he could clearly see that Wei Qian's spiritual aura had completely changed. It had become the Thousand Illusions Sword Master. They actually used some kind of secret method to allow the Thousand Illusions Swordmaster to obtain Wei Qian's body. In Leng Shiqi's words, it was possession. Furthermore, it was Yu Qiyan who wanted the Thousand Illusionary Swordmaster to possess his body. His body would not feel any discomfort, and the techniques that they cultivated were the same. This meant that the Thousand Illusionary Swordmaster had a young body. The biggest weakness of the Thousand Illusions Swordmaster was his age. In fact, in theory, a Tianyuan cultivator could live for 300 to 400 years. But that was only in theory. After all, even among Tianyuan cultivators, it was difficult to avoid fighting. Once injured, it would more or less affect one's lifespan. The Thousand Illusion Swordmaster's qi and blood had long deteriorated, and his strength was probably less than half of his peak. That was why it was so difficult for him to face Lin Yuanliang and the old man together. Otherwise, with his strength, it was not impossible for him to fight one against two. Now that he had obtained a young body, his strength had almost recovered to its peak state. Of course, he also had a very big disadvantage. That was Wei Qian's cultivation was only at the unity of heaven and man level. In terms of spiritual power, it was far from the Tianyuan cultivator. However, for a battle between Tianyuan cultivators, spiritual power was not the most important thing. Mastery of the origin energy of heaven and earth was the most important. Wei Qian, or rather, the Thousand Illusions Swordmaster, stood in the air, holding the Thousand Illusions sword in his hand. His eyes flashed with a fierce light that looked down on the world. It's been too long. I haven't felt this powerful for too long. The Thousand Illusions Swordmaster murmured. Lin Yuanliang, the old man, today, let me see what you two juniors are capable of. He held his sword across his chest and did not attack. However, everyone present felt the boundless sword essence. It was as if everything in the world had become a sword. Hiss! The old man said in surprise. This old thing has actually touched the edge of the laws of heaven and earth. If he is given a few more decades, he may really break through to that level. Lin Yuanliang's expression was also very serious. It seems that this mission is not as easy as I thought. Humph, what era is it now? You still dare to look down on juniors? Today, I will show you that today's world no longer belongs to you. Lin Yuanliang's body flashed with a dazzling golden light. He flashed and flew to the forehead of the golden-armored mad god behind him. The two merged into one. The patterns on the mad god's body became clearer. Every strand of hair and pores grew out. It had completely turned into a living god. Crash! At the same time, the old man waved his hand and a purple lightning flashed across the void. The faint roar of a giant beast came from the 9 heavens thunder clouds. A terrifyingly huge thunder beast poked out of the thunder clouds. It opened its mouth and a thunderlight pillar that was hundreds of feet thick gushed out. The Thousand Illusions Swordmaster's expression did not change. Let me show you the true power of the Thousand Illusions Sword Codex. Chapter 705. The Thousand Illusion Sword Elder's Thousand Illusion Dao Sword suddenly disappeared. At the same time, there were thousands of Dao sword shadows suspended in mid-air. It looked like a sword formation. He formed a seal with his hands and a dreamy bubble wrapped around the sword shadows and connected them together. After the formation was formed, countless sword hums resounded for hundreds of miles. Anyone who heard the sword hums felt their vision turn black, as countless illusions entered their minds. Only the disciples of the Thousand Illusion Sword Elder were not affected too much. Some of the spirit casters on Leng Shiqi's side hurriedly set up an isolation array to prevent too many casualties. Within the sword formation, countless sword threads intertwined and shot out. Those sword silks were split into two, and one of them shot into the sky. Those seemingly weak sword silks easily broke through the layers of lightning, and in the blink of an eye, they pierced through the body of the lightning beast, creating bloody holes. The other half of the sword silk shot towards Lin Yuanliang. Lin Yuanliang used the mad god's body to press down 3 fist seals. The first seal shattered mountains and rivers, the second seal shattered mountains and tsunamis, and the third seal shattered the heavens and earth. The entire mountain range was constantly shaking, and the spirit cultivators who were still fighting had already retreated far away. Leng Shiqi also retreated. The power of the three Sky Origin stage experts fighting in the sky was too terrifying. If he got any closer, he would be implicated and die without a burial ground. However, Leng Shiqi also watched their battle without blinking. After all, there were very few opportunities to see a life and death battle between Sky Origin stage experts. As long as he could see a little bit of the trick, he would benefit a lot. Other than that, he was also looking for an opportunity to see if he had the chance to interfere. Facing Lin Yuanliang's fist seal that shook the void, the Thousand Illusion Sword Elder's seal changed. Those sword silks instantly condensed into a huge sword. One sword to break three seals. At this time, the old man's lightning beast was strangely shrinking. The smaller it became, the denser the lightning on its body became. In the end, the huge beast that was supporting the sky condensed into a spear blade that flickered with endless lightning. The old man swung his spear downwards, and the blinding lightning was so bright that no one dared to look at it directly. In an instant, a large patch of sword silk was sliced apart, and the remaining power was directed at the Thousand Illusion Sword Master. You do have some skills. The Thousand Illusion Sword Master's expression was still very calm, as if he was guiding a junior. The sword wheel around him shot up into the sky, and all the sword shadows in the sword matrix flowed out like dragons soaring into the sky. This part of the sky shattered inch by inch, looking like a broken spider web. Lin Yuanliang and the old man were shocked. They did not expect the Thousand Illusion Sword Elder to be so powerful. There were very few people in the Heavenly Yuan stage who could kill him. The Thousand Illusions Sword Master swept his gaze across Leng Shiqi, following which, tens of sword silks shot towards Leng Shiqi. He also knew that today's disaster was all caused by Leng Shiqi, and this boy must die. However, Leng Shiqi did something that no one expected. He did not dodge, and instead, he jumped up and rushed forward. Yan Ming and Deng Xinlei immediately shouted, "Sir, what are you doing? Be careful." The old man also shouted. He did not want the new member of the elite hall to die like this. The others did not understand why Leng Shiqi did this. How could he, a person in the gang spirit realm, take on a battle between Heavenly Yuan stage masters? If he did not escape at this time, he might have a chance to survive under the protection of so many masters. Not only did he not escape, but he also rushed forward. This action was undoubtedly seeking death. The disciples of the Thousand Illusions Sword Sect sneered. Today's disaster was caused by Leng Shiqi, and they could not wait for Leng Shiqi to be smashed into pieces. Of course, Leng Shiqi would not court death. He observed the battle between the three Heavenly Yuan stage masters, and could see that the Thousand Illusions Sword Master had the upper hand in the situation of 1 against 2. He was not too worried about the old man and Lin Yuanliang. The two of them had not shown their trump cards yet, but the Thousand Illusions Sword Master had. However, if they continued to fight like this, even if they won in the end, it would be a Pyrrhic victory. In particular, if the Thousand Illusions Sword Master was really forced into a desperate situation, he might go crazy and kill Leng Shiqi and the other masters in the gang spirit realm and oneness of heaven and men stage to be his scapegoat. Originally, he was still looking for an opportunity to attack. Now that the Thousand Illusions Sword Master attacked first, it naturally gave him a chance. It was a chance to end this battle as quickly as possible. The Thousand Illusions Sword Master also showed a trace of surprise when he saw Leng Shiqi rushing over. However, he did not feel disdain. Instead, he felt puzzled and surprised. In his opinion, the 4 great chiefs were not idiots who would court death. This person must have his own guard of honor. Immediately, the Thousand Illusions Sword Master frowned. This was because Leng Shiqi was not penetrated by the sword silk. Instead, he passed through it directly. Unless one was a master in the Heavenly Yuan stage, no one could pass through the sword formation and sword silk so easily. How could Leng Shiqi, who was only in the gang spirit realm, do it? In reality, no one noticed that Leng Shiqi was holding a sword in his hand. To be more precise, it was a faint sword shadow. As a sword cultivator, the Thousand Illusions Sword Master immediately felt that something was wrong. He stared at the faint sword shadow and frowned. As a swordsman, he felt an indescribable power from the sword shadow. It was a power that could kill him. The 4 wings on Lung Shiqi's back flapped, and he turned into a 5-colored ray of light and rushed towards the Thousand Illusions Swordmaster. In the eyes of others, he was simply courting death. However, the strange thing was that the powerful sword formation that defeated the 2 Heavenly Yuan stage cultivators suddenly twisted and disappeared. Lin Yuanliang and the old man were shocked. They knew how powerful the sword formation was. How could it be destroyed in an instant by a Gang Spirit Realm cultivator? What made them even more incredulous was that Lung Shiqi was wielding a sword-shaped shadow as he stabbed towards the Thousand Illusions Swordmaster. However, the Thousand Illusions Swordmaster did not react at all, regardless of whether he was forming hand seals or waving his Taoist sword. From afar, the Thousand Illusions Swordmaster was like an actor on a stage. It was a little comical. The Thousand Illusions Swordmaster was also stunned. At this moment, he could not even mobilize his own spiritual energy, let alone the chi of heaven and earth. Soon after, his body, which was floating in the air, fell to the ground uncontrollably. Lung Shiqi's sword was already in front of him. The Thousand Illusions Swordmaster had lived for hundreds of years. What had he not seen before? However, at this moment he started to panic. In his panic, he could only use the Thousand Illusions sword to block in front of him. He wanted to use the power of the level 8 earth weapon to stop Lung Shiqi. However, with a clang, the Thousand Illusion Dao sword in his hand was instantly knocked away, and the sword-shaped phantom pierced through his heart. The Thousand Illusions Swordmaster looked at the hole in his chest in a daze. He could not believe that he would die so mysteriously. He could not believe that he would die in the hands of a Gang Spirit Realm cultivator. Of course, he was more desperate. Once he died, the Thousand Illusions Sword sect would be destroyed. Puffed, the Thousand Illusions Swordmaster's body fell from 1,000 feet high. Without the support of any spiritual energy, his body was smashed into meat paste. The Thousand Illusions Swordmaster, who had protected the Thousand Illusions Sword sect for hundreds of years, had fallen. On the battlefield, which was filled with tens of thousands of people, not a single sound could be heard. Everyone was staring at Lung Shiqi, including Lin Yuanliang, the old man, and the Heavenly Yuan stage practitioner. Lung Shiqi stood in the air. He used the passive skill Hell's Curse to absorb the remnant soul of the Thousand Illusions Swordmaster. The soul power of a Tianyuan stage cultivator instantly restored his spiritual energy and broke through the barrier to level 8 of the Gang Spirit Realm. At the same time, the souls of the Thousand Illusions Swordmaster and Wei Qian were also kept in the mansion of the dead. Lung Shiqi was also looking forward to seeing what was special about the souls of Tianyuan stage cultivators. The reason why he dared to mess things up and killed the Thousand Illusions Swordmaster so easily was because of one thing: Divine Sword Bright. Chapter 706. The Divine Sword Clear Light could cut off all the spiritual energy in the world. In front of this sword, anyone was no different from an ordinary person. This included the Sky Origin stage experts. It was a pity that the Divine Sword Clear Radiant that Lung Shiqi had obtained was a one-time consumable item. Otherwise, he would have felt invincible. However, after using the Divine Sword Clear Radiant once, he had an indescribable strange feeling in his heart. He wanted to immediately go into seclusion to comprehend it, so he immediately shouted, "Leave no one alive!" Only then did everyone finally react. They suppressed the shock in their hearts and charged towards the disciples of the Thousand Illusions Sword sect. The remaining disciples of the Thousand Illusions Sword sect had no fighting spirit and were in a mess. Under the encirclement of many experts, they suffered heavy casualties. This was not to say that the disciples of the Thousand Illusions Sword sect were too useless. It was just that after Wei Qian and the Thousand Illusions Sword Elder, their 2 strongest backers, felt they could no longer see any hope. Not to mention the many experts of the Dark Thunder Guards, there were 2 Sky Origin stage experts, Lin Yuanliang and the Old Man in the Sky. There was also Lung Shiqi, who could be said to be abnormal. All the disciples of the Thousand Illusions Sword sect had lost any fighting spirit. The old man's eyes moved, and a shocking thunder fell from the 9 heavens. In the blink of an eye, the few remaining experts of the Thousand Illusions Sword sect who were at the Unity of Heaven and Man stage were killed. Then he and Lin Yuanliang did not make any more moves. With their identity and status, killing someone at the Unity of Heaven and Man stage was already lowering their status. If they were asked to go down and kill those disciples at the Spirit Astral Realm and Spirit Aperture Realm, it would be embarrassing. However, there was indeed no need for them to make a move. Even Leng Shiqi did not make a move, because the situation had been decided. He spread out his colorful wings and hovered in the sky above the battlefield. It seemed like he was preventing any fish from escaping, but in fact, he was constantly absorbing a large amount of soul power. There were tens of thousands of disciples of the Thousand Illusions Sword sect. Among them, there were many spirit cultivators at the four realms of heaven and man. Just the remnant soul power alone increased Leng Shiqi's spiritual power and physical strength by a large amount. At the same time, a large number of souls were absorbed into the underworld. In just an hour, the Thousand Illusory Sword sect, one of the top sects in the Bahuang army, had been reduced to a pile of crimson ruins. Holding a bracelet and a ring, Yanming walked to Leng Shiqi. Sir, this is the storage space of the Thousand Illusions Sword Sect's Sect Master Wei Qian and Grand Elder Thousand Illusions Sword Venerable. Is this a storage ring? Leng Shiqi picked up the light-colored ring. This storage ring was the rarest and most precious of all the storage rings. The space inside a storage ring was very large, enough to match 10 storage bracelets. Moreover, it was more flexible, and it was usually engraved with formations. It was a priceless treasure. Anyway, this was the first storage ring that Leng Shiqi had seen. He took the bracelet and ring without hesitation. Then he shouted, "All the resources of the Thousand Illusionary Sword sect will be divided equally." As soon as these words were spoken, the crowd burst into cheers. These people were all from the Dark Thunder Guards, the Discipline Commission, and the military. However, these three places were extremely strict. It was not easy to profit from them. The Thousand Illusionary Sword sect was a top sect that had stood tall for hundreds of years. The resources it had accumulated were definitely huge. Even if everyone divided them equally, they would still be able to get a lot of good things. Generally speaking, most of the resources seized after destroying a force would fall into the hands of the top few people. The rest would be divided among the subordinates, and there would not be much left. Therefore, Leng Shiqi's generosity made everyone have a good impression of him. In addition, in the process of attacking the Thousand Illusions Sword sect, he first used a trick to gather all the disciples and secretly destroyed the Thousand Illusions 9 Pavilion Sword formation. In the end, he seriously injured the sect master Wei Qian and killed the Thousand Illusions Sword Venerable by himself. Regardless of whether it was his strength or his bearing, they were all admirable. Unknowingly, Leng Shiqi's prestige among these people had reached a peak. Wu Yi was even more envious in his heart. In fact, to Leng Shiqi, what he lacked the most was not those resources. He only needed to obtain the things of Wei Qian and the Thousand Illusionary Sword Venerable. In particular, the complete Thousand Illusionary Sword Codex inside made him extremely envious. Seeing that Yan Ming had offered up the treasure, Deng Xinlei walked over with a long sword in his hand. One could see that the sword was still trembling violently in his hand. If it were not for Deng Xinlei forcefully suppressing it, the spiritual sword would have probably broken free. A sword that could be suppressed by an expert of the Unity of Heaven and Man stage with all his strength was the most precious treasure of the Thousand Illusionary Sword sect. The rank 8 earth weapon, the Thousand Illusions Sword. Sir, a treasured sword is a gift to a hero. I believe that you are the true owner of this sword. Deng Xinlei had been completely subdued by Leng Shiqi. From his methods to his strength, he was far inferior to him, so he naturally began to fawn over him. Leng Shiqi raised his eyebrows, and his eyes could not help but reveal a few wisps of light. He already had a lot of high-grade spiritual weapons on him, especially in Li Jueqing's storage bracelet where he found several rank 7 precious weapons, but he had never owned a rank 8 earth weapon. Not to mention the Gang Spirit Realm and the Unity of Heaven and Man stage. Even the Tianyuan stage experts did not have a rank 8 earth weapon. Leng Shiqi reached out to hold the Thousand Illusionary Sword, and the sword immediately buzzed, causing his hand to go numb. Humph! Leng Shiqi snorted softly, and his palm instantly turned into the color of diamond. Majestic mental strength surged, and at the same time, he operated the Thousand Illusionary Sword Codex in his body, finally making the Thousand Illusionary Sword Codex settle down. With this Thousand Illusionary Sword, it was equivalent to letting his strength soar out of thin air. Now, even if it was an expert at the middle stage of the Unity of Heaven and Man stage, he was confident that he could kill him within a few moves. As for the late stage of the Unity of Heaven and Man stage, he might be able to hold on for a while. This was not because Lung Shiqi was arrogant, but because he had accidentally comprehended the four spirits formation after mastering the 16 heaven changes true solution, and had a rank 8 earth weapon in his hand. Ordinary experts at the middle stage of the Unity of Heaven and Man stage were no match for him. At this time, Lin Yuanliang and the old man, two experts of the Tianyuan stage, came over with strange expressions. They stood on both sides of Lung Shiqi and did not speak. They just stared at Lung Shiqi. Lung Shiqi was numbed by their stares. He put away the Thousand Illusionary Sword, cupped his fists and said, "Seniors, what are you doing?" Lin Yuanliang and the old man looked at each other and shouted to the East Town Thunder Flame Army, "Listen up, gather the resources and return to Donglin County in formation." "Yes, sir." Then he said to Lung Shiqi, "There are some things that are inconvenient to say. Anyway, the Thousand Illusionary Sword sect has been destroyed. Let them deal with the follow-up matters themselves. Come with us." Lung Shiqi more or less guessed their intention. It was nothing more than the way he killed the Thousand Illusionary Sword Master was too strange. Fortunately, he had already thought of an excuse to deal with it. So the three of them immediately left and soon came to the dense forest dozens of miles away. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.